The four-star general hit the supermarket floor like a sack of bricks. His chest stopped moving. His lips turned blue. Shoppers screamed and backed away, cell phones out, nobody doing a damn thing except recording him die. Then a woman in dirty scrubs came running through the crowd. Thin, exhausted, looked like she hadn't slept in days, and dropped to her knees beside him without hesitation. Her hands locked onto his sternum. Compressions. Hard. Fast. Perfect rhythm. "Stay with me, Marine." The words came out without thinking. 4 words that would destroy everything she'd spent years hiding. If you want to see how this story ends, if you want to watch justice finally catch up to the people who thought they could bury the truth, then stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights in St. Augustine Memorial Hospital's emergency department hummed like dying insects. Lila Brennan stood at the triage desk filling out paperwork for the 3rd overdose case of the night, her blue scrub stained with someone else's blood, her blonde hair falling out of a ponytail she'd tied 12 hours ago. The clock on the wall said 11:47 p.m. Her shift had started at 7 that morning. "Nurse Brennan?" She didn't look up. Dr. Marcus Holloway's voice had that edge to it, the one that meant he was about to make her night worse. "I need those discharge papers for bed 7. "Already done," Lila said. "They're in the— I don't care where they are. I need them now." She turned around. Holloway stood there in his pristine white coat, arms crossed, that smug expression plastered across his face like he owned the building. Behind him, 2 residents watched with barely concealed smirks. Lila grabbed the papers and handed them over without a word. Holloway snatched them, glanced at her signature, then tossed them back on the counter. "Next time, don't make me come looking for you." He walked away. One of the residents, Jenkins, fresh out of med school and already insufferable, leaned against the desk. "Must be tough, huh? Being at the bottom of the food chain?" Lila picked up the papers and filed them properly. "Must be tough knowing you'll never be half the Dr. Holloway pretends to be." Jenkins's face went red. He opened his mouth to respond, but another nurse, Rita, older, permanently exhausted, grabbed Lila's arm. "Don't," Rita whispered. "Not worth it." Lila pulled away gently. Never is. The thing about St. Augustine Memorial was that it looked good on paper. 500 beds. Level 1 trauma center. Ranked in the top 50 hospitals in Georgia. What the rankings didn't mention was the culture. The way nurses got blamed for everything. The way doctors treated them like glorified waitresses. The way administration cared more about lawsuits than patients. And Lila Brennan had learned to keep her head down. Most days, anyway. She was restocking a crash cart when the call came through. "All available staff to the ER mass casualty event. ETA 4 minutes. Rita's face went pale. "What happened?" The radio crackled again. "Multi-vehicle pile-up on Interstate 85. At least 15 critical. Incoming now." The emergency department exploded into controlled chaos. Doctors barked orders. Nurses prepped trauma bays. The air filled with that electric tension that came right before everything went to hell. Lila grabbed a gown and gloves, her body moving on autopilot. Then the doors burst open. Paramedics flooded in, pushing gurneys, blood everywhere, screaming. A woman clutching her child. A man with a steering column through his chest. Chaos in its purest form. "Trauma 1, GSAW to the abdomen. Wait, no, that's crush injury. I need ONEG, 4 units, now." "Where's respiratory? Someone get me respiratory." Dr. Holloway stood frozen in the center of the room. Just stood there. His face had gone white. His hands shook. The great Marcus Holloway, head of emergency medicine, paralyzed while people died around him. "Dr. Holloway?" A resident grabbed his arm. "Sir, what do we— I need to—" Holloway's voice cracked. "Someone get— you." Lila's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Take the GSW to Trauma 2. You start a central line on the kid in Bay 4. You call surgery and tell them we need an OR in 5 minutes or that crush injury is dead." Every head in the room turned to look at her. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then they moved. The resident grabbed the gurney and ran. Another nurse sprinted toward Bay 4. Someone picked up the phone to call surgery. Lila walked straight to the worst case, the man with the steering column, and started barking orders without thinking. I need x-ray here now. Someone get me trauma shears. He's hypotensive. Start pushing fluids. Where's my goddamn O-neg? A nurse appeared with blood. Another with shears. The x-ray tech ran over with a portable machine. On my count, we're going to stabilize this column before we move him. If it shifts even an inch, he bleeds out. Everyone understand? Nods all around. 1, 2, 3. They moved together like a machine. The column stayed stable. The patient kept breathing. Lila's hands worked with terrifying precision. Cut away his shirt, assess the damage, check his pupils, monitor his pressure. Pressure's dropping. He's bleeding internally. We need that OR. They're ready, someone called out. Move him. Go. The gurney disappeared down the hallway. Lila turned to the next case without breaking stride. 15 minutes later, every critical patient had been stabilized and distributed to the appropriate departments. The ER had transformed from chaos into something resembling order. Nurses worked quickly but calmly. Doctors actually knew what they were doing now that someone had organized them. And Dr. Marcus Holloway stood in the corner staring at Lila Brennan like he'd just watched her sprout wings. She stripped off her gloves and walked past him without making eye contact. Nurse Brennan? She stopped. Holloway's voice had lost that edge. Now it just sounded confused. Where did you learn to do that? Do what? Triage like that. Command like that. You sounded like someone who's done this before? His jaw tightened. Behind him, several other doctors and nurses had gathered, all staring at her with the same expression. Curiosity mixed with suspicion. I went to nursing school, Lila said flatly. Same as everyone else. She walked away before he could ask more questions, but the damage was already done. The rumors started immediately. By the next shift, everyone in the hospital had heard about the nurse who took command during the pileup. Some people called her a hero. Others said she'd overstepped. Dr. Holloway had filed a formal complaint with hospital administration claiming she'd undermined his authority during a crisis situation. Rita cornered her in the break room. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking people were dying. Holloway is furious. You made him look like an idiot in front of the entire department. He made himself look like an idiot. I just kept people alive. Rita lowered her voice. Where did you really learn to do that, Lila? I told you. Nursing school. Bullshit. I went to nursing school. They don't teach you how to run a mass casualty event like you're commanding troops. Lila stood up and grabbed her bag. I need to go. Lila, I said I need to go. She left Rita sitting there looking worried. The truth was eating Lila alive from the inside out. Because Rita was right. They didn't teach those things in nursing school. They taught them in combat. Lila Brennan had joined the Army at 19, not because she was patriotic, not because she wanted adventure, because her mother had died of cancer and left behind $30,000 in medical debt, and the recruiter had promised her loan repayment and a chance to become a medic. She'd scored high enough on the test to qualify for 68W combat medic training. 6 months later, she was stationed with the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Benning. 8 months after that, she was deployed to a place that officially didn't exist, doing things the government would never acknowledge. Lila had pulled wounded soldiers out of burning vehicles. She'd held pressure on wounds while rounds cracked past her head. She'd made life or death decisions in seconds, because seconds were all she had. And then one mission went bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that ended careers and gave you nightmares for the rest of your life. After that, Lila came home, got her discharge, used her GI Bill to finish nursing school, and buried everything about her military service so deep, she almost convinced herself it had happened to someone else. Almost. She'd been working at St. Augustine Memorial for 2 years. Quiet. Competent. Invisible. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked too close. Until now. The suspension notice came 3 days later. Lila sat in the assistant director's office, staring at the paperwork. Hospital administration had determined that her unauthorized assumption of command during a medical emergency violated protocol and put patients at risk. She was being placed on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. This is insane, Lila said. I saved those people. Assistant Director Karen Walsh looked uncomfortable. I understand your perspective, Ms. Brennan, but Dr. Holloway was the senior physician on duty. You circumvented the chain of command. There was no chain of command. He was frozen. That's not what his report says. His report is a lie. Walsh's expression hardened. Are you calling Dr. Holloway a liar? I'm saying he panicked, and I did his job for him. That kind of attitude is exactly why we're having this conversation. Walsh slid a document across the desk. This is a 2-week suspension without pay. If you'd like to contest it, you'll need to file a formal appeal. Lila stared at the paper. Her rent was due in 8 days. Her bank account had maybe $600 in it. 2 weeks without pay would destroy her. If I appeal, what happens? There will be a hearing. You'll present your case. Dr. Holloway will present his. The board will make a final determination. And if I lose? Walsh didn't answer directly. I'd recommend using these 2 weeks to think carefully about whether St. Augustine Memorial is the right fit for you. Translation: quit or get fired. Lila signed the suspension form and walked out. Motishik. She was sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Is this Lila Brennan? Male voice. Older. Authoritative. Who's asking? My name is Colonel James Madigan, United States Army. I'm trying to reach a former specialist who served with the 3rd Infantry Division between 2019 and 2021. Lila's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Brennan, I'm not calling to cause problems. I'm calling because a video has been circulating online from the mass casualty incident at your hospital. Several veterans have identified your voice and mannerisms as consistent with military combat medic training. I'm a civilian nurse. You were also a 68W who received a commendation for valor during... Stop. Silence on the other end. I left that life behind, Lila said quietly. I don't talk about it. I don't think about it. It's done. I understand, but I need to tell you something. I don't want to hear it. One of the men in that video, one of the patients you stabilized during the pileup, was Brigadier General Thomas Voss. Lila's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He's currently in critical condition at your hospital, Madigan continued. The steering column you stabilized prevented him from bleeding out at the scene. You saved his life, Ms. Brennan. And when he woke up this morning and saw the video, he specifically asked for you by name. Why? Because 15 years ago, General Voss commanded the unit you were attached to during Operation Sandstorm. The world tilted sideways. Operation Sandstorm. The mission that ended everything. I can't help you, Lila whispered. I'm not asking you to help me. The general is asking to see you, that's all. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him... Her voice cracked. Tell him I can't. She hung up. Then she sat in her car and shook for 20 minutes straight. Back. Lila made it home around 4 in the afternoon. Her apartment was a 1-bedroom in a complex that had seen better days. Water-stained ceiling, neighbors who screamed at each other through paper-thin walls. But it was cheap, and it was hers, and it was far away from anything that reminded her of who she used to be. She dropped her bag on the couch and stood in the middle of the living room, not knowing what to do with herself. Suspended. The word kept bouncing around her skull. She'd done everything right during that pileup. Every decision had been correct. Every order had saved a life. And they were punishing her for it. Her phone buzzed, text from Rita. Are you okay? Lila didn't respond. Another buzz. Different number. This is Colonel Madigan. General Voss is asking for you again. He's insisting. Please consider visiting him. Delete. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled down a box from the top shelf. Inside were the things she never looked at anymore. Dog tags. Photographs. Certificates. Her Army combat uniform. Still folded the way she'd packed it 6 years ago. And buried at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, the medal they'd given her after Operation Sandstorm. The one she'd never worn. The one that represented the worst night of her life. Lila stared at it for a long time. Then she put everything back in the box and shoved it in the closet. Cheers. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of sitting in her apartment. 3 days of ignoring calls from the hospital, from Rita, from Colonel Madigan. 3 days of trying not to think about General Voss lying in a hospital bed, asking for her. On the 4th day, she drove back to St. Augustine Memorial. It was late. Visiting hours were over. But Lila still had her badge, and security knew her face, and nobody questioned when she walked through the main entrance at 11 p.m. She took the elevator to the ICU. General Voss was in a private room at the end of the hall. Through the window, she could see him, older than she remembered, hair gray now, tubes running everywhere, but definitely alive, definitely breathing. A nurse she didn't recognize sat at the station nearby. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see the patient in 607. Visiting hours are..." "I'm the nurse who brought him in during the pileup." The other nurse's expression changed. "Oh, you're her. He's been asking about you constantly. Go ahead." Lila pushed open the door. The general's eyes were closed. For a moment she thought he was asleep. Then his head turned and he looked right at her. Recognition flashed across his face. "Brennan," he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd removed earlier. "I'll be damned." She stayed by the door. "Sir?" "Don't sir me. I'm retired. Tom is fine." He tried to sit up and winced, though apparently I'm also currently broken in several places. "You had a steering column through your chest cavity. You're lucky to be alive." "That's what they keep telling me. They also keep telling me some nurse took command of the entire ER and kept me from bleeding out before surgery." He studied her face. "Funny thing about that nurse. She sounded exactly like a combat medic I served with in 2020. Lila crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The hell you don't." Voss leaned back against the pillows. Operation Sandstorm, November 2020. Convoy got hit by an IED outside Kandahar. You pulled 4 wounded men out of a burning vehicle while rounds were coming in from 3 directions. Held pressure on Martinez's femoral artery for 40 minutes until the medevac arrived. They gave you the soldier's medal for it. They gave me paperwork and a discharge. Because you had PTSD and survivor's guilt and you refused treatment. Lila's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about what I went through. I know 3 men died that night. I know you blamed yourself, and I know you disappeared after your discharge and nobody could find you." He gestured around the hospital room. "Until now. I came because Colonel Madigan wouldn't stop calling. Now you've seen me. I'm fine." "You're fine. We're done." She turned to leave. "They suspended you, didn't they?" Lila stopped. "Madigan told me," Voss said. "Said some doctor filed a complaint because you made him look bad. Said they're trying to force you out. It's handled. Like hell it is." Voss grabbed the call button and pressed it repeatedly. "Get me Colonel Madigan. Now." "Sir, Tom, you need to rest." "Oh, what I need is to make some calls." He looked at her seriously. "You saved my life, Brennan. Twice. Once in Kandahar and once on that interstate. I'm not letting them bury you for it." The door opened. A different nurse poked her head in. "General, is everything—" "Get me a phone. I need to speak with hospital administration immediately." The nurse glanced at Lila nervously. "Sir, it's almost midnight." "Then they better answer quickly." "Bet." Lila left the ICU and took the stairs down to the main lobby. Her head was spinning. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. The general getting involved, people asking questions, her past coming back to the surface. She pushed through the lobby doors and stepped into the cool night air, and found Dr. Marcus Holloway waiting by her car. He looked different than usual, less smug, more uncertain. He had his hands shoved in his pockets and was staring at the ground. "Nurse Brennan." She didn't respond. "I heard you were here," he said. I need to talk to you. I'm suspended. You got what you wanted." "I didn't want..." He stopped, started again. "During the pileup, I froze. You're right. I panicked, and you stepped in and saved lives while I stood there like an idiot." Lila waited. "The complaint I filed..." Holloway looked up at her. "I was embarrassed and angry, and I made it your problem instead of dealing with my own issues. That was wrong." "Yeah, it was. I'm going to withdraw the complaint. Tell administration it was a misunderstanding. Don't bother. I'm sure they've already made up their minds." Holloway pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "Actually, I've already submitted the withdrawal. This is a copy for your records. The suspension should be lifted by tomorrow morning." He held it out. Lila didn't take it. "Why?" she asked. "Because you were right, and I was wrong. And because..." He hesitated. "Because I watched the security footage from that night about 50 times. And every time I watch it, I see the same thing. You didn't just save those patients, you saved me. If you hadn't taken command, if you'd frozen too, people would have died. And it would have been my fault. Lila took the paper. Holloway nodded once, then walked toward his car. Dr. Holloway. He turned around. Thank you, Lila said quietly. He nodded again and drove away. Lila stood in the parking lot holding the paper and feeling like the ground had shifted underneath her. Maybe things were going to be okay. Maybe she could go back to being invisible. Maybe... Her phone rang. Colonel Madigan. Against her better judgment, she answered. Ms. Brennan, I apologize for calling so late, but something's happened that you need to know about. What? General Voss made several calls tonight to military and hospital contacts. He's arranged for a formal review of the incident that led to your suspension. I know, Dr. Holloway already withdrew his complaint. That's not what I'm talking about. Madigan paused. The review won't be conducted by the hospital. It will be conducted by an independent military medical assessment team, and they'll be looking into everything. The pileup, your response, Dr. Holloway's actions, hospital protocols, all of it. Lila's stomach dropped. Why? Because General Voss believes there's something larger going on at St. Augustine Memorial, something beyond one nurse getting suspended, and he wants answers. Colonel, I appreciate the general's concern, but I don't need Ms. Brennan. Madigan's voice went hard. 4 other nurses have filed complaints in the last year about Dr. Holloway's behavior during emergencies. All 4 complaints were dismissed by administration. All 4 nurses left the hospital shortly afterward. The general believes there's been a systematic cover-up of medical negligence. Lila closed her eyes. The assessment team arrives tomorrow morning, Madigan said. They'll want to interview you. I'm asking you, as someone who served with honor, to tell them the truth. All of it. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. He hung up. Lila got in her car and sat there for a long time. The box in her closet flashed through her mind. The uniform. The medal. The person she used to be. She'd spent 6 years running from that version of herself. Maybe it was time to stop running. The assessment team arrived at exactly 800 hours. 3 people in military uniforms and 2 in civilian clothes walked through St. Augustine Memorial's main entrance like they owned the place. Hospital administrators scrambled to accommodate them. Dr. Holloway was pulled into a conference room for questioning. Other staff members were interviewed one by one. Lila was called in at 09:30. The conference room had been transformed into something resembling a military hearing. The 5 team members sat on one side of a long table. A recording device sat in the center. Someone had brought coffee. A woman in an Army colonel's uniform gestured to the empty chair. Ms. Brennan, please sit. Lila sat. I'm Colonel Andrea Fisher. This is Lieutenant Colonel Park, Major Williams, and 2 civilian medical consultants from the Department of Defense. We're here to conduct an independent review of the November 8th mass casualty incident. Do you understand why you're here? General Voss requested an investigation. General Voss believes there are systemic issues at this hospital that put patients at risk. We're here to determine if he's correct. Fisher opened a folder. Let's start with your background. You worked as a 68W combat medic from 2019 to 2021, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you received the Soldier's Medal for actions during Operation Sandstorm. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you list your military service on your hospital employment application? Lila had known this question was coming. I wanted a fresh start. I didn't think my military background was relevant to working as a civilian nurse. Even though combat medic training is directly applicable to emergency medicine, I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't advertise it. Major Williams leaned forward. Ms. Brennan, we've reviewed the security footage from November 8th. Your performance during that incident was exceptional. You demonstrated command presence, tactical thinking, and crisis management skills far beyond what's typically expected from a registered nurse. Where did you learn those skills? The Army. Be specific. Lila took a breath. Combat medic training teaches you to function under pressure. You learn to make decisions quickly because people die if you don't. You learn to prioritize casualties based on survivability. You learn to command because in combat situations, rank doesn't matter. Results matter. And you use those skills during the pileup. Yes. even though doing so violated hospital protocol. Protocol was getting people killed. Fisher made a note. Explain. Dr. Holloway froze. The entire ER was looking to him for direction, and he couldn't function. If I'd followed protocol and waited for him to recover, multiple patients would have died before we stabilized them, so I took command. Without authorization. With 15 critical patients bleeding out in front of me. One of the civilian consultants spoke up. Ms. Brennan, would you say your military training gave you capabilities that exceeded those of the senior physician on duty? It was a trap question. Lila could feel it. My military training taught me how to function during chaos. Dr. Holloway is an excellent physician. He had a bad moment, that's all. That's generous of you, especially considering he filed a complaint that got you suspended. He withdrew the complaint. After General Voss got involved. Lila didn't respond. Fisher closed her folder. Ms. Brennan, we've interviewed 6 other staff members who were present during the pileup. All 6 confirmed that you took command of the situation and that your actions likely saved multiple lives. However, we've also uncovered some concerning patterns. Here it comes, Lila thought. Dr. Holloway has been involved in 4 previous incidents where nurses reported his inability to function during high-stress emergencies. In each case, hospital administration dismissed the complaints, and the nurses who filed them eventually left the hospital. We believe there's been a systematic effort to protect Dr. Holloway's reputation at the expense of patient safety. Major Williams opened his own folder. We've also identified irregularities in patient outcome reports. Multiple cases where Dr. Holloway was the attending physician show discrepancies between what actually happened and what was documented. Are you saying he falsified records? Lila asked. We're saying there are questions that need answering, and you're the first person who's been willing to speak honestly about what happened. Colonel Fisher leaned forward. Ms. Brennan, we need you to provide a formal statement. Everything you witnessed, everything you know about Dr. Holloway's performance, everything about how the hospital handled your suspension. Will you do that? Lila looked at the 5 faces staring at her. 6 years of keeping her head down. 6 years of staying invisible. 6 years of running from who she used to be. Yes, ma'am, she said. I'll tell you everything. Dijak. The formal statement took 4 hours. Lila recounted every detail of the pileup, every order she'd given, every moment Holloway had frozen, every patient she'd stabilized. The assessment team recorded everything, asked clarifying questions, and took extensive notes. When it was over, Colonel Fisher walked her to the conference room door. Thank you for your service, Ms. Brennan, both in the Army and here. What happens now? Now we finish our investigation. We'll be submitting our findings to both military and civilian oversight boards. If our suspicions are correct, there will be consequences. For Dr. Holloway? For everyone who enabled him. Lila left the hospital feeling like she'd just confessed something she couldn't take back. Her phone rang before she reached her car. Rita. Where are you? Rita sounded panicked. Just leaving the hospital. Why? Because Dr. Holloway just got escorted out by hospital security. And administration is calling emergency meetings. And everyone's saying the military is taking over the ER. What the hell is going on? I don't know. Lila, don't lie to me. I'm not lying. I really don't know what's happening. She hung up before Rita could ask more questions. The next call came from Colonel Madigan. Ms. Brennan, General Voss would like to see you. Can you come back to the ICU? Now? Now. General Voss had been moved to a regular room. He was sitting up in bed looking much healthier than before. Colonel Madigan stood beside him in full uniform. Brennan, Voss said. Sit down. Lila sat. The assessment team just briefed me on their preliminary findings. You were right about everything. Holloway has been covering up his own incompetence for years, and hospital administration has been helping him do it. Sir, I never said... You didn't have to. The evidence speaks for itself. He exchanged glances with Madigan. But we found something else. Something worse. Lila's stomach tightened. During the pileup, 3 patients died before reaching surgery, Madigan said. According to hospital records, all 3 deaths were unavoidable due to the severity of their injuries. But according to the paramedics who transported them, all 3 were stable at the scene. What are you saying? We're saying someone at this hospital altered their treatment after they arrived. and all 3 patients were under Dr. Holloway's direct supervision when they died. The room went silent. "You think he killed them?" Lila whispered. "We think he made critical errors that led to their deaths, and then he falsified records to cover it up." Voss leaned forward. "Brennan, I need you to understand something. When you took command that night, you didn't just save lives. You exposed a system that's been protecting a dangerous physician, and now that system is going to come down hard on everyone involved. Including me? Especially you, because you're the witness who can't be silenced. You're a decorated veteran with a spotless record. If they try to discredit you, the story goes national. If they try to fire you, the story goes national. Either way, you're about to become very visible." Lila closed her eyes. "I didn't want this." "Nobody ever does," Voss said gently. "But sometimes doing the right thing means accepting consequences you didn't ask for." She opened her eyes. "What happens next?" "Next, the assessment team completes their investigation. Then their findings go to the State Medical Board, the Hospital Accreditation Board, and the Department of Defense. After that," he shrugged, "after that, justice happens. One way or another." Lila drove home in a daze. Everything was spiraling out of control. She just wanted to save lives during the pileup. She hadn't wanted investigations or military reviews or national attention. She just wanted to do her job and go home. But that option was gone now. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from other nurses wanting to know what was happening. Messages from local news stations requesting interviews. A message from hospital administration requesting she attend a meeting tomorrow morning. She ignored all of them. Instead, she went home, pulled the box down from her closet, and stared at the medal inside. The soldier's medal, given for acts of heroism not involving combat with an enemy. She'd earned it by pulling wounded men from a burning vehicle. She'd also earned it on the worst night of her life. Because while she'd saved 4 men during Operation Sandstorm, 3 others had died. 3 others she couldn't reach in time. 3 others whose faces she still saw every time she closed her eyes. That was the thing nobody understood about being a hero. You remembered the ones you lost more than the ones you saved. Lila wrapped the medal back in tissue paper and returned it to the box. Then she sat on her bed and waited for whatever was coming next. It came at 6 a.m. Someone pounding on her apartment door. Lila stumbled out of bed and looked through the peephole. Rita stood outside, looking frantic. Lila opened the door. "What?" "Turn on the news. Right now." Rita pushed past her and grabbed the TV remote. She flipped to a local news channel. A reporter stood outside St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. The caption read, "Breaking. Military investigation uncovers potential medical malpractice at Atlanta Hospital." Sources confirmed that an independent military assessment team has been investigating St. Augustine Memorial Hospital following a mass casualty incident earlier this month. According to those sources, the investigation has uncovered evidence of systematic misconduct by senior medical staff, including potential falsification of patient records and a pattern of negligence that may have led to multiple patient deaths. The reporter continued talking, but Lila stopped hearing the words. Her face appeared on screen, a still image from the security footage. Lila in her bloody scrubs, hands on a patient's chest, mouth open mid-command. The caption, "Whistleblower nurse exposes hospital cover-up." "Oh no," Lila whispered. Her phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, one after another. Rita grabbed her shoulders. "Lila, what did you do?" "I told the truth." "You told the—" "Lila, your face is on every news channel in the state. Everyone knows who you are now. You're she—" "I know what I am." Another knock on the door. This time it was Colonel Madigan. He had 2 military police officers with him. "Ms. Brennan, I apologize for the early hour, but General Voss has requested your presence at a press conference this morning. We're here to escort you to the hospital." "A press conference?" "The assessment team is releasing their preliminary findings. The general wants you there." I don't want... I'm afraid it's not optional." Madigan's expression softened. "But you won't be alone. We'll be with you the entire time." Lila looked at Rita, who stared back helplessly. Then she looked at the TV, where her face was still being broadcast to thousands of people. The box in her closet flashed through her mind again. The uniform. The medal. The person she'd been running from for 6 years. Maybe it was time to stop running. "Give me 10 minutes to change," Lila said. "We'll wait outside." The press conference was held in St. Augustine Memorial's main auditorium. Every seat was filled, reporters everywhere, cameras everywhere, hospital staff crowded in the back. And at the center of it all, on a raised platform, sat the assessment team, General Voss in a wheelchair, and an empty chair waiting for Lila. Colonel Madigan led her through the crowd to the platform. Flashbulbs exploded, questions shouted from every direction. "Ms. Brennan, is it true you're a decorated veteran? Did Dr. Holloway really falsify patient records? How many people died because of hospital negligence?" Madigan guided her to the empty chair. General Voss reached over and squeezed her hand once. "You're going to be fine." Colonel Fisher stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning. I'm Colonel Andrea Fisher, United States Army Medical Command. 3 weeks ago, this hospital experienced a mass casualty event that resulted in 15 critical patients being transported to this emergency department. During that event, several irregularities occurred that prompted an independent military assessment. I'm here today to present our preliminary findings." The room went silent. "Our investigation has uncovered systemic failures at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. Specifically, we have identified a pattern of medical negligence by senior emergency department staff, falsification of patient outcome reports, and administrative cover-ups designed to protect staff members at the expense of patient safety. These failures have existed for at least 3 years and have likely contributed to multiple preventable deaths." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The primary individual responsible for these failures is Dr. Marcus Holloway, former head of emergency medicine at this hospital. Dr. Holloway has been placed on immediate suspension pending criminal investigation. Hospital administrators who enabled his behavior are also under investigation. The murmurs grew louder. However, this story is not just about failure, it's also about heroism. Fisher turned to look at Lila. On November 8th, during the mass casualty event, a registered nurse named Lila Brennan took command of a chaotic emergency situation and saved multiple lives. Ms. Brennan is a former Army combat medic who received the Soldier's Medal for Valor during Operation Sandstorm. Her actions on November 8th demonstrated the same courage and skill that earned her that commendation. Cameras swung toward Lila. She wanted to sink through the floor. Ms. Brennan was subsequently suspended by hospital administration for violating protocol. That suspension has been permanently rescinded. Furthermore, based on our findings, we are recommending Ms. Brennan for a civilian commendation for her actions during the November 8th incident. The reporters exploded with questions. Fisher raised her hand. "Ms. Brennan has agreed to answer a few questions. Please keep them brief." Lila stood on shaking legs and stepped up to the microphone. A reporter in the front row stood immediately. "Ms. Brennan, why didn't you tell anyone about your military background?" "I wanted to leave that part of my life behind." "But you used your military training to save lives. Don't you think the hospital had a right to know?" "I think patients have a right to competent care. Whether that comes from a veteran or a civilian shouldn't matter." Another reporter. "What was it like watching Dr. Holloway get praised while you got suspended?" "It was frustrating. But I didn't do what I did for recognition. I did it because people were dying." A third reporter. "Do you blame the hospital for what happened?" Lila paused. She thought about Rita warning her to keep her head down. She thought about Holloway filing his complaint. She thought about the administrators who'd suspended her without investigating. She thought about the 3 patients who died under Holloway's care. "I blame a system that protects doctors over patients," she said quietly. "And I blame myself for not speaking up sooner." The room went completely silent. "Because I knew something was wrong," Lila continued. "After the pile-up, I knew Holloway had frozen. I knew patients had died unnecessarily, but I told myself it wasn't my problem. I told myself to stay invisible. And maybe if I'd spoken up right away, the investigation would have started sooner. Maybe those 3 patients' families would have gotten answers sooner." General Voss was staring at her with something like pride. "So yes," Lila said, "I blame the hospital, but I also blame every person who saw something wrong and said nothing, including myself." She stepped away from the microphone. The reporters erupted again, but Fisher cut them off. "That's all for now. The full investigation report will be released next week. Thank you." Military police cleared a path through the crowd. Lila followed them out of the auditorium in a daze. Outside, Rita was waiting. That was incredible, Rita said. That was terrifying. You told the truth on national television. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Lila didn't answer, because all she could think about was the box in her closet, the medal she'd never worn, the part of herself she'd buried. Maybe it was time to dig it back up. Chad. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching her ceiling fan turn and thinking about everything that had happened. The pileup, the suspension, the investigation, the press conference, her face on every news channel. Around 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and pulled out her laptop. News articles filled her screen. Her face filled her screen. Hero nurse exposes hospital corruption. And decorated veteran saves lives, gets punished, and military investigates hospital after whistleblower steps forward. They were calling her a whistleblower now. Lila closed the laptop. Then she walked to her closet and pulled down the box one more time. She lifted out her old Army combat uniform, held it up. It still fit. Underneath were the photographs, her unit, the men she'd served with, the men she'd saved, the men she'd lost. And there, at the very bottom, was the soldier's medal. Lila picked it up and turned it over in her hands. For 6 years she'd hidden this, hidden everything it represented, hidden the person she used to be. But that person had saved lives. That person had run toward danger while everyone else ran away. That person was still inside her. Maybe it was time to stop being ashamed of that. Her phone buzzed. Text from General Voss. Can't sleep either. Come visit an old man? Lila smiled and grabbed her keys. Woke. The ICU was quiet at this hour. General Voss was sitting up in bed reading something on a tablet. He looked up when Lila entered. Couldn't stay away? You texted me. Fair point. He set down the tablet. How are you holding up? Lila sat in the visitor's chair. Everyone knows who I am now. Yes. My face is on the news. Yes. I can't go back to being invisible. No, Voss said gently. You can't. Lila was quiet for a moment. Is this what you wanted? She asked. When you started the investigation? I wanted justice for the patients who died. I wanted accountability for the people who covered it up. And I wanted the woman who saved my life to get the recognition she deserved. I didn't save your life for recognition. I know. That's why you deserve it. A nurse walked past the room, glanced in, then did a double take when she recognized Lila. She hurried away looking flustered. That's going to keep happening, Voss said. People recognizing you, wanting to talk to you, treating you like you're special. I'm not special. I just did my job. You did your job when everyone else failed. That's the definition of special. Lila pulled the medal from her pocket and set it on the bedside table. Voss stared at it. I've been carrying that around all day, Lila said, trying to figure out what to do with it. What did you decide? That maybe it's time to stop running from who I was. That maybe the person I was is the person I still am. That maybe... She stopped. Maybe I've been hiding for no reason. Voss picked up the medal carefully. You earned this by saving 4 men while 3 others died in front of you. You've been carrying guilt for the 3 you couldn't save instead of pride for the 4 you could. Am I right? Lila's throat tightened. Brennan, I've been in command for 30 years. I've made decisions that saved lives and decisions that cost lives. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the only way to survive this career, military or civilian, is to focus on the people you save, not the ones you lose. Because if you focus on the losses, you'll destroy yourself. I tried focusing on the people I saved. It didn't help. Because you were doing it alone. You buried your service and pretended it never happened. You isolated yourself from the only people who could understand what you went through. He held up the medal. This isn't just a piece of metal. It's a connection to everyone who's ever worn a uniform and made impossible choices. And by hiding it, you disconnected yourself from that community. Lila wiped her eyes angrily. I didn't want to be part of that community anymore. Too bad. Because that community just became part of you again. The second your story went national, every veteran in this country saw themselves in you. You're one of us now, whether you like it or not. He handed the medal back. Lila held it tightly. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Same thing you've always done, Voss said. Run toward the chaos. Save the people you can, and accept that you can't save everyone. Someone knocked on the door. Colonel Madigan poked his head in. General, sorry to interrupt, But there's been a development. What kind of development? The kind that's about to make tomorrow very interesting. Madigan stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. His face was tight in a way that made Lila's stomach drop. 3 hours ago, the Georgia State Medical Board issued emergency suspension orders for Dr. Marcus Holloway and 2 hospital administrators, effective immediately. Voss sat up straighter. That was fast. There's more. The district attorney's office just announced they're opening a criminal investigation into patient deaths at St. Augustine Memorial. They're specifically looking at 3 cases from the November 8th pileup where patients died under suspicious circumstances. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. The 3 stable patients. Correct. And Ms. Brennan, they're going to want your testimony, not just about what happened during the pileup, but about hospital culture, Dr. Holloway's pattern of behavior, everything. I already gave a statement to the assessment team. That was military. This is criminal court, different stakes. Voss grabbed his tablet and pulled up a news site. Look at this. The headline read, "Criminal Charges Expected in Hospital Death Scandal." Below it was a photograph of Dr. Holloway being escorted from his home by police. Lila stared at the image. Holloway looked smaller somehow, older, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face gray with shock. "They arrested him?" she whispered. "Not yet," Madigan said. "But based on what the DA's office is saying, it's coming. They're building a case for involuntary manslaughter, multiple counts." The room spun slightly. Involuntary manslaughter. People were dead because Holloway had panicked and then covered his tracks. And Lila was the witness who'd exposed it all. "Miss Brennan," Madigan's voice pulled her back. "There's something else you need to know. The hospital is going to fight this. Hard. They're already hiring lawyers, preparing counterstatements, looking for ways to discredit the investigation. How can they discredit facts? By attacking the person who provided them. You." Lila stood up abruptly. "I need some air." She walked out of the room before either man could stop her. The hallway was empty except for a janitor mopping the far end. Lila leaned against the wall and tried to breathe normally. This was spiraling too fast. Yesterday, she'd been a suspended nurse trying to stay invisible. Today, she was the star witness in a criminal case that was about to dominate headlines for months. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered anyway. "Miss Brennan?" Female voice, professional. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a senior partner at Walsh & Associates. We're a law firm specializing in medical malpractice and whistleblower protection. I'd like to discuss representation." "I don't need a lawyer." "With respect, you absolutely do. The hospital is going to come after you. They're going to try to paint you as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. They're going to dig into your past, your military service, your reasons for leaving the Army. And they're going to do it publicly." Lila's hand tightened on the phone. "Why would they do that?" "Because if they can destroy your credibility, they can cast doubt on everything you've said, which means they can potentially avoid criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and losing their accreditation. You're a threat to them, Ms. Brennan, and threats get eliminated." I told the truth. "The truth doesn't matter if nobody believes you. That's why you need protection." Lila hung up, then immediately regretted it. Because Walsh was right. The hospital was going to come after her, and she had no idea how to defend herself against lawyers and PR firms and people with unlimited resources. She walked back into Voss's room. Both men looked up. "I need help," Lila said quietly. By morning, Lila had a lawyer. Jennifer Walsh turned out to be exactly as professional as she'd sounded on the phone. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She met Lila at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital and laid out the situation with brutal clarity. St. Augustine Memorial is owned by Meridian Healthcare Group, which operates 17 hospitals across the Southeast. They have a legal team of 43 attorneys and an annual budget that would make your head spin. They are not going to let this story destroy their reputation without a fight. What kind of fight? The kind where they file defamation suits, leak information to discredit witnesses, and make your life hell until you either recant your statement or disappear entirely. Lila wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Can they do that? Legally? Some of it. The rest is a gray area. But here's what matters. You have leverage they don't. You're a decorated veteran who saved lives while exposing corruption. The optics are terrible for them and great for you, as long as you don't give them ammunition. What kind of ammunition? Walsh pulled out a folder. I did some preliminary research on your background. You left the Army in 2021 with an honorable discharge. You received treatment for PTSD at a VA facility for 6 months before enrolling in nursing school. You've had 3 jobs since then, 2 hospitals and an urgent care clinic. Clean record at all 3, no disciplinary issues, no complaints. You're basically bulletproof. Then what are you worried about? I'm worried about what I don't know. Is there anything in your past, military or civilian, that could be used against you? Anything that might look bad under scrutiny? Lila thought about Operation Sandstorm, the burning convoy, the men she'd saved and the men she hadn't. There was an incident during my deployment, she said carefully. A mission that went wrong. People died. Were you responsible for their deaths? No, but I blame myself for a long time. Walsh made a note. That's not a problem. PTSD and survivor's guilt are expected for combat veterans. If anything, it makes you more sympathetic. What else? Nothing. I've kept my head down since leaving the Army. No drama, no controversies. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. The hospital will leak a story claiming you have a history of insubordination and that you've been planning to sue them for months. They'll say your testimony is motivated by revenge, not truth. When that happens, we'll counter with your military record, the assessment team's findings, and testimony from other nurses who've witnessed similar behavior from Dr. Holloway. Other nurses? I've already identified 4 who are willing to come forward. They were afraid before because the hospital buried their complaints. But now that criminal charges are on the table, they're ready to talk. Lila set down her coffee. This is going to get ugly, isn't it? It's already ugly. We're just making sure you survive it. But the hospital's counterattack came faster than Walsh predicted. That afternoon, a local news outlet ran a story titled, "Whistleblower Nurse Has History of Conflict with Hospital Administration." The article cited anonymous sources claiming Lila had been written up twice for insubordination, that she'd threatened to sue the hospital after her suspension, and that several doctors had complained about her combative attitude during patient care. None of it was true. Rita called immediately. Have you seen this? I'm looking at it now. Lila, they're lying. I've worked with you for 2 years. You've never been written up for anything. I know. So why aren't you denying it? Because my lawyer says not to engage yet. She says they want me to respond emotionally so they can paint me as unstable. Rita was quiet for a moment. This is insane. They're destroying your reputation. They're trying to destroy my credibility. There's a difference. Doesn't feel different. After hanging up, Lila sat in her apartment and forced herself to read the entire article. Every paragraph was carefully crafted to make her look like a troublemaker, a disgruntled employee with a grudge, someone whose testimony couldn't be trusted. Her phone rang again. This time it was Colonel Madigan. Miss Brennan, General Voss wanted me to inform you that the Department of Defense is releasing a statement tomorrow in response to the hospital's allegations. What kind of statement? The kind that includes your full military record, your commendations, and testimony from your commanding officers about your character and competence. The general is not letting them drag your name through the mud. He doesn't have to do that. He knows. He's doing it anyway. Lila closed her eyes. Tell him thank you. Tell him yourself. He's being discharged tomorrow morning and he wants to see you before he leaves. The next morning brought a new wave of headlines. Pentagon defends whistleblower nurse calls hospital allegations baseless and defamatory. The Department of Defense had released a statement that was essentially a nuclear strike on St. Augustine Memorial's credibility. It detailed Lila's service record, her commendations, her exemplary conduct throughout her military career. It included quotes from General Voss calling her one of the finest medics I've ever served with. It systematically dismantled every claim the hospital had made, and it ended with a warning. Any further attempts to smear a decorated veteran would be met with legal action. Lila read the statement 3 times in disbelief. Then she drove to the hospital. General Voss was in the discharge lounge wearing civilian clothes and looking remarkably healthy, considering he'd nearly died 3 weeks ago. Colonel Madigan stood beside him holding paperwork. Brennan, Voss smiled when he saw her. Come to see an old man off? Come to ask why you just declared war on a hospital. Because they declared war on you first. I'm just returning fire. Lila sat down across from him. Sir, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is making everything bigger. The more attention this gets, the worse it becomes. Good. I want it to get worse. I want every hospital in the country to know what happens when they protect bad doctors and punish good nurses. I want this story so big they can't bury it. But no buts. Voss leaned forward. You saved my life twice. You exposed corruption that's been killing patients for years. You stood up when everyone else stayed silent, and now you're paying the price for doing the right thing. So excuse me if I use whatever influence I have to make sure you don't pay alone. Madigan handed her an envelope. The general has also established a legal defense fund on your behalf. Several veteran organizations have already contributed. You won't have to worry about legal fees. Lila stared at the envelope. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep fighting, Voss said. Say you won't let them intimidate you into silence. Say you'll see this through to the end. I will. Good. Because it's about to get a lot worse before it gets better. He wasn't wrong. The hospital's second attack came that evening. Someone leaked Lila's medical records from her time at the VA, her PTSD diagnosis, her therapy sessions, her medication history, everything that was supposed to be private and protected by federal law. The story ran on every local news outlet. Whistleblower nurse received psychiatric treatment after military discharge. The implication was clear. Lila was unstable. Her testimony couldn't be trusted. She was a troubled veteran with mental health issues who'd targeted an innocent doctor. Walsh called her immediately. Do not respond. Do not comment. Do not even look at social media. They leaked my medical records. That's illegal. Extremely illegal. Which is why we're going to sue them into oblivion. But first we need to let them finish digging their own grave. Every move they make is giving us more ammunition. How is this giving us ammunition? They're destroying me. They're destroying their credibility. Medical records are protected by HIPAA. Whoever leaked yours committed a federal crime. And when we prove the hospital was behind it, which we will, they're going to face criminal charges on top of everything else. Lila sat on her couch with her phone in her hand, watching her life get dissected on television. A panel of talking heads debated whether her PTSD made her an unreliable witness. Another segment questioned whether she'd exaggerated Dr. Holloway's failures because of her own mental health struggles. A third suggested she was seeking attention and money through false allegations. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from people she barely knew offering support. Messages from people she'd never met calling her a liar. Messages from reporters wanting interviews. She turned off her phone and sat in silence. Then someone knocked on her door. Lila looked through the peephole and saw Rita standing outside holding 2 bottles of wine. She opened the door. I know you probably want to be alone, Rita said. But I also know you shouldn't be alone right now, so I'm inviting myself in. Lila stepped aside and let her enter. They sat on the couch, and Rita poured 2 very large glasses of wine. I read what they're saying about you, Rita said. It's garbage, all of it. Doesn't matter. People believe garbage. Some people. Not everyone. Rita took a long drink. I talked to 6 other nurses today. All of them want to come forward and testify about Holloway. They're just waiting for someone to ask them. Lila looked at her. You're organizing witnesses? I'm organizing the truth. Holloway has terrorized that ER for 3 years. He screamed at nurses, ignored their assessments, made critical mistakes and blamed them when patients suffered. Every single person who's worked with him has a story, and now they're ready to tell those stories. The hospital will retaliate. Let them try. We've got a decorated war hero on our side and the Pentagon backing her up. What do they have? Lies and leaked medical records. I'll take our odds. Lila felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll keep fighting, because if you quit now, they win. And nurses like us will keep getting screwed over by doctors like Holloway. I'm not quitting. Good. Because I didn't bring 2 bottles of wine just to watch you give up. They drank in silence for a while. Then Rita said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really leave the army? Lila stared into her wine glass. Because I was tired of watching people die. And now you're a nurse in an ER. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. In the army, people died because of war. In a hospital, they're supposed to survive. That's the whole point. And when they don't survive because someone screwed up, she stopped. That's worse than war. Because it was preventable. Rita nodded slowly. That's why you took command during the pileup. Because you knew Holloway was going to get people killed. Yes. And that's why you're not backing down now. Yes. Then you're exactly the kind of person who needs to be fighting this fight. Rita raised her glass. To not backing down. Lila clinked her glass against Rita's. To not backing down. The criminal investigation moved forward with startling speed. Within a week, the district attorney's office had subpoenaed hospital records, interviewed staff members, and convened a grand jury to review evidence. Dr. Holloway hired 3 defense attorneys. The hospital hired 6. Meridian Healthcare Group issued a statement denying all wrongdoing and promising full cooperation with investigators. Nobody believed them, especially not after the 4th nurse came forward. Her name was Michelle Torres, and she'd worked in the St. Augustine Memorial ER for 5 years before quitting abruptly 6 months ago. She gave an interview to a national news outlet describing a pattern of abuse and negligence that made Lila's experience look tame by comparison. According to Torres, Dr. Holloway had repeatedly ignored nurses' assessments, overruled their medical judgment, and retaliated against anyone who questioned his decisions. She described incidents where patients had suffered complications or died because Holloway refused to listen to nursing staff, and she claimed the hospital had known about all of it and done nothing. They protected him because he brought in money, Torres said on camera. He was fast. He cleared beds quickly. He made the ER profitable. And the hospital didn't care that he was dangerous as long as he was making them money. The interview went viral. By the next day, 7 more nurses had contacted Jennifer Walsh, offering to testify. The day after that, 2 doctors came forward with similar stories. The avalanche had started, and St. Augustine Memorial Hospital was standing directly in its path. Lila watched it all unfold from her apartment, feeling like she'd started something she couldn't control. Walsh kept her updated daily. The grand jury is hearing testimony this week. They're going to indict Holloway for involuntary manslaughter. 3 counts. Maybe more. What about the hospital? They're facing civil lawsuits from families of deceased patients. At least 6 so far. And the state medical board is threatening to revoke their accreditation if they don't implement immediate reforms. Good. It gets better. The DA's office is also investigating who leaked your medical records. They've traced the leak to a hospital administrator who was taking orders from Meridian's legal team. That's conspiracy to commit a federal crime. They're all going down. Lila should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. When does this end? She asked. When justice is served, or when they run out of money for lawyers, whichever comes first. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened since the pileup. 3 weeks ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was the center of a scandal that was tearing apart one of Georgia's largest hospital systems. She thought about the 3 patients who died under Holloway's care. She thought about all the other patients who died over the years because the hospital protected him. She thought about the nurses who'd tried to speak up and been silenced. And she realized Walsh was right. This wasn't just about one nurse getting suspended. This was about a system that valued profit over patients and doctors over nurses and reputation over truth. This was about power. And who got to hold it? Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Stop talking to the media or you'll regret it. Lila stared at the message. Then she screenshotted it and forwarded it to Walsh. 30 seconds later, Walsh called. Was that a threat? Sure sounded like one. Perfect. I'm forwarding this to the DA's office and the police. Threatening a witness in a criminal investigation is a felony. Whoever sent this just made a very stupid mistake. You sound happy about it. I am happy about it. Because every time they threaten you, they prove how desperate they are. And desperate people make mistakes. Lila hung up and stared at the threatening text. Someone was scared enough to risk a felony charge, which meant they had something big to hide. And tomorrow, she was going to find out what. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Colonel Madigan. Ms. Brennan, I apologize for calling so late, but something's happened that you need to know about immediately. Lila sat up. What? The grand jury just issued their indictment. Dr. Marcus Holloway is being charged with 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 6 counts of medical negligence, and 2 counts of falsifying medical records. That was fast. There's more. They're also charging 2 hospital administrators with conspiracy to obstruct justice and 1 administrator with unauthorized disclosure of protected medical information. And the DA's office is preparing criminal charges against Meridian Healthcare Group's general counsel for witness intimidation. The text message? Among other things, apparently you weren't the only person they threatened. Lila felt something shift inside her chest. They were all going down. Every person who'd protected Holloway, buried complaints, threatened witnesses, leaked records, all of them were facing criminal charges. Ms. Brennan? Madigan's voice pulled her back. There's one more thing. What? The trial is going to be high profile, national media coverage. You're going to be the prosecution's star witness, and the defense is going to come at you with everything they have. General Voss wants to make sure you're prepared for that. I'll be fine. With respect, you don't know that. These are experienced defense attorneys who specialize in destroying witnesses on the stand. They're going to question your memory, your motives, your mental health, your military service, everything. And they're going to do it in front of cameras and reporters and a jury that will decide whether you're credible. Lila's hands tightened on the phone. What are you saying? I'm saying the general wants to arrange training, mock testimony sessions, media preparation, everything you'll need to survive what's coming. When? Starting tomorrow. If you're willing. Lila looked at the threatening text message still glowing on her screen. Then she thought about the 3 patients who'd died, the nurses who'd been silenced, the years of corruption that nobody had stopped. I'm willing, she said. Good. Because this is about to get much worse, and we need you ready. Madigan hung up. Lila sat in the darkness of her apartment and felt the weight of what was coming settle on her shoulders. She was about to walk into the biggest fight of her life, against lawyers and corporations and people with unlimited resources, all because she'd done the right thing during a mass casualty event. Her phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number. Another text message. But this one was different. My daughter was one of the patients you saved during the pileup. Thank you for speaking up. We're all behind you. Lila read it twice. Then she saved it. Because tomorrow, when the training started and the pressure increased and the defense attorneys began their attacks, she was going to need to remember why she was doing this. Not for recognition, not for revenge. For the people who'd survived because she'd taken command, and for the people who hadn't survived because someone else had failed them. She finally fell asleep sometime after 3 a.m., and when she woke up 6 hours later, there were 17 news vans parked outside her apartment building and a warrant waiting for her testimony in the case that was about to change everything. Lila stood at her apartment window watching reporters set up cameras on the sidewalk below. 17 news vans. Maybe more now. She'd stopped counting after the first hour. Her phone rang. Walsh. Don't go outside. I'm sending a car to pick you up through the parking garage. We need to get you somewhere secure before the media circus gets worse. Where? General Voss has offered his home. It's private property with security. The press can't get near you there. I can't just hide. You're not hiding. You're preparing. The prosecution wants to meet with you this afternoon to review your testimony. And we need to do mock cross-examination before the defense gets their hands on you. Lila grabbed her bag. How long do I have? Car's there in 10 minutes. Pack for 3 days. She threw clothes into a duffel bag without thinking about what she was grabbing. Toothbrush. Medication. The metal from her closet. She didn't know why, but she packed it anyway. 8 minutes later, she was in the parking garage climbing into a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver didn't introduce himself, just pulled out through a back exit while reporters shouted questions at the vehicle. They drove for 40 minutes into a neighborhood where houses had gates and actual land between them. The SUV turned into a long driveway and stopped at a security checkpoint. A guard checked IDs, then waved them through. General Voss's home was a sprawling ranch-style property that looked more like a compound than a residence. The SUV pulled up to the main house, and Lila got out carrying her duffel bag. Colonel Madigan met her at the door. Welcome. The general is inside with your legal team. They're setting up in the dining room. Lila followed him through a house that was somehow both military precise and comfortable. Photos of Marines on the walls. Commendations in frames. a life of service on display. The dining room had been converted into a war room. Walsh sat at one end of a long table surrounded by files and laptops. General Voss sat at the other end looking healthier than he had any right to be. Between them were two people Lila didn't recognize, a man in an expensive suit and a woman with a legal pad. Walsh stood. "Lila, this is Marcus Reeves from the district attorney's office. He's lead prosecutor on the case. And this is Dr. Sarah Kim, a medical expert who will be testifying about standards of care in emergency medicine." Reeves shook her hand. His grip was firm and his eyes were sharp. "Ms. Brennan, thank you for agreeing to testify. Your cooperation is essential to this case." "I just want to tell the truth. That's exactly what we need. But I have to warn you, the defense is going to try to prevent that truth from reaching the jury. They're going to attack your credibility, your memory, your motives. They're going to make you seem unreliable or biased or mentally unstable, and they're very good at it." Lila set down her bag. "Then I guess we better make sure I'm ready." Dr. Kim smiled slightly. "I like her already." They spent the next 6 hours reviewing every detail of the November 8th pileup. What time did the first ambulance arrive? How many patients? What were their injuries? Who gave which orders? Where was Dr. Holloway standing? What exactly did Lila say? What did others say? Every microsecond accounted for and documented. Reeves was relentless. "You said Dr. Holloway was frozen. Define frozen." "He wasn't moving, wasn't giving orders, just standing there while patients were dying." "How long was he frozen?" "Maybe 30 seconds, long enough for people to start panicking." "Maybe? Or exactly?" "I don't know exactly. I was focused on patients." "The defense is going to say you're exaggerating, that Dr. Holloway was assessing the situation, not frozen." "How do you respond?" Lila met his eyes. "I respond that I've seen people assess situations in combat. This wasn't assessment. This was panic." Reeves made a note. "Good. Use your military experience. It establishes your credibility as someone who knows how to evaluate performance under pressure." They moved through the timeline methodically. Every decision Lila had made, every patient she'd stabilized, the moment Dr. Holloway had recovered and started functioning again. Then they got to the deaths. 3 patients died that night, Reeves said. All 3 were under Dr. Holloway's direct care after you'd stabilized them. Can you walk me through what happened? Lila closed her eyes and pulled up the memories. The first one was a crush injury. Male, mid-30s. I'd stabilized his airway and started fluids. His pressure was low, but holding. I handed him off to Dr. Holloway and moved to the next patient. What happened after you handed him off? I don't know. I was working on other cases. But 20 minutes later, someone told me he'd coded and they couldn't bring him back. Did you review his chart afterward? Yes. The record showed he'd received the wrong blood type during transfusion. Dr. Kim leaned forward. That's consistent with what we found. Someone administered type A blood to a type B patient. That triggers a hemolytic reaction, fatal if not caught immediately. Who made the mistake? Reeves asked. According to the records, it was a nursing error, Lila said quietly. But I talked to the nurse who was assigned to that patient. She said Dr. Holloway ordered the transfusion and she questioned the blood type because it didn't match what was in the system. He told her to give it anyway. Did she document that? No, she was too scared. Reeves swore under his breath. Will she testify? I don't know. We'll find out. What about the other 2 deaths? They went through each case. A teenage girl with internal bleeding who'd waited too long for surgery because Holloway had misread her labs. An elderly man who'd been given the wrong medication and gone into cardiac arrest. All preventable. All covered up in the official records. By the time they finished, it was dark outside. Walsh ordered food. They ate while reviewing witness lists and evidence logs and defense strategies. Then Reeves said, Okay, now comes the hard part. Mock cross-examination. I'm going to play defense attorney and tear you apart. You need to practice staying calm and credible no matter what I say. Ready? Lila nodded. Ms. Brennan, isn't it true that you were suspended from St. Augustine Memorial for insubordination? I was suspended for taking command during a mass casualty event. So you admit you violated protocol? I admit I saved lives. That's not what I asked. Did you or did you not violate hospital protocol by giving orders you weren't authorized to give? Yes. And you were angry about being suspended, weren't you? I was frustrated that I was punished for doing the right thing. Frustrated enough to retaliate against Dr. Holloway by making false accusations? I didn't make false accusations. I told the truth. The truth according to someone who was so traumatized by her military service that she required psychiatric treatment for PTSD. Isn't that correct? Lila's jaw tightened. Yes. So you have a documented history of mental health issues. I have a documented history of seeking help after experiencing combat trauma. That doesn't make me unstable or dishonest. Reeves held up a hand. Stop. You're getting defensive. Your voice is rising. The jury will interpret that as anger or instability. Try again. When I mention your PTSD, how do you respond? Lila took a breath. I acknowledge it calmly and explain that seeking treatment was the responsible thing to do. And I point out that my mental health has nothing to do with whether Dr. Holloway made mistakes that killed patients. Better. But the defense won't stop there. They're going to dig into Operation Sandstorm. They're going to ask about the men who died. They're going to try to make it seem like you blame yourself for their deaths, and you're projecting that guilt onto Dr. Holloway. That's insane. That's legal strategy. So how do you handle it? They practiced for another 2 hours, every possible attack, every trap question, every way the defense could twist her words or undermine her credibility. By the time they finished, Lila felt like she'd been through actual combat. Walsh walked her to a guest room down the hall. You did well, but tomorrow's going to be harder. How? Tomorrow we bring in a real defense attorney, someone who's never met you and has no reason to go easy. He's going to try to break you. If you survive that, you'll survive the actual trial. Lila dropped her duffel bag on the bed. What if I don't survive it? Then we lose the case. Holloway walks. The hospital avoids accountability, and every nurse who tried to speak up learns that telling the truth gets you destroyed, so you're going to survive it. Walsh left. Lila sat on the bed and stared at nothing. Her phone buzzed. Text from Rita. Saw the news. You okay? Define okay. Fair point. Just checking you're still breathing. Barely. That's the spirit. Hang in there. We're all rooting for you. Lila set down her phone and lay back on the bed. Tomorrow, a stranger was going to spend hours trying to destroy her credibility in the most personal ways possible, and she had to sit there and take it calmly, professionally, without breaking. She pulled the medal from her duffel bag and held it up to the light. The soldier's medal. For acts of heroism not involving combat with an enemy, she'd earned it by running toward burning vehicles while everyone else ran away. Maybe tomorrow would be the same thing, just a different kind of fire. The defense attorney arrived at 0900 hours. His name was Richard Castellano, and he looked exactly like someone who made a career destroying witnesses. Silver hair, tailored suit, cold smile. Ms. Brennan? He shook her hand. I understand you're preparing for testimony. I'm here to help by showing you what you're up against, nothing personal. I understand. Good. Then let's begin. They sat across from each other at the dining room table. Reeves, Walsh, and Dr. Kim watched from the side. General Voss sat in the corner taking notes. Castellano opened a file. Ms. Brennan, you claim Dr. Holloway was frozen during the mass casualty event. But you were also under significant stress, weren't you? Yes. And stress can affect memory, can cause people to misinterpret what they're seeing. Isn't that correct? It can. But I know what I saw. Do you? Because according to 3 other witnesses present that night, Dr. Holloway was actively coordinating care, not frozen at all. Those witnesses are wrong. Or you are. And you're so committed to your version of events that you can't admit you might have misunderstood the situation. I didn't misunderstand anything. Ms. Brennan, you suffer from PTSD, a condition that can cause hypervigilance, anxiety, and misperception of threats. Is it possible your PTSD caused you to interpret normal medical assessment as dangerous in action? Lila's hands tightened under the table. No. You seem very certain, but you've also had flashbacks related to your military service, haven't you? Episodes where you relived traumatic events? That's not relevant. It's extremely relevant. If you've had episodes where you can't distinguish past trauma from present reality, how can the jury trust your account of what happened during the pileup? Because I wasn't having a flashback. I was doing my job. Your job as a nurse, not as a combat medic. Yet you took command of an emergency department as if you were still in the military. Doesn't that suggest some confusion about your role? I took command because someone had to, or because your PTSD caused you to revert to military behavior in a civilian setting where it wasn't appropriate. Walsh held up a hand. Stop. Leela, you're getting defensive again. Your shoulders are up. You're leaning forward. You look aggressive. The jury will read that as unstable. Try again. Castellano smiled slightly. She's right. Let's continue. Ms. Brennan, did you ever seek revenge against people who wronged you during your military service? No. Never? You spent months in therapy dealing with anger and guilt? Are you saying you never blamed anyone for what happened to your unit? I blame myself. Interesting. So you have a pattern of assigning blame, sometimes to yourself, sometimes to others. Isn't it possible you're blaming Dr. Holloway now because you need someone to be responsible, just like you needed someone to be responsible for what happened during Operation Sandstorm? Something cracked inside Lila's chest. That's not what this is, isn't it? You've spent 6 years running from your military past, hiding your service, refusing to talk about it. And then suddenly you're thrust into a mass casualty situation that brings back all those traumatic memories. Is it really so surprising that you'd lash out at the first authority figure who seemed to fail, just like you felt you'd failed your unit? I didn't lash out. I reported facts. Facts filtered through the lens of someone with documented mental health issues and a history of blaming herself for deaths she couldn't prevent. That's not a reliable witness, Ms. Brennan. That's someone projecting her own trauma onto an innocent doctor. Lila stood up abruptly. He's not innocent. 3 people died because of his mistakes. Sit down. Castellano's voice went hard. You just lost your composure in front of a jury. You stood up, raised your voice, looked unstable. Congratulations. You just destroyed your own credibility. Lila stood there shaking. Walsh stood too. Let's take a break. Castellano closed his file. Ms. Brennan, I need to be honest with you. If you react that way on the stand, the defense will eviscerate you. They'll paint you as an unstable veteran who can't handle stress and made false accusations against a respected doctor. The jury will side with Holloway, and you'll have destroyed your life for nothing. So what do I do? You learn to stay calm no matter what they say. You learn to breathe through the attacks, and you learn that defending yourself emotionally makes you look guilty even when you're not. He walked out of the room. Leela sat back down and put her head in her hands. I can't do this. Reeves leaned forward. Yes, you can. Castellano just showed you the worst-case scenario. Now you know what's coming. We're going to practice until you can handle it without breaking. Again. They practiced for 3 more hours. Castellano came back even harder. More personal attacks. More questions about her PTSD. More implications that she was unstable or biased or lying. And slowly, painfully, Lila learned to absorb the attacks without reacting. Learned to pause before answering. Learned to keep her voice level even when he said things designed to enrage her. Learned to redirect questions back to the facts instead of defending herself emotionally. By late afternoon, Castellano actually nodded with something like approval. Better. You're still too reactive when I mention Operation Sandstorm, but you're managing the PTSD questions well. Keep practicing. He left. Lila sat at the table feeling hollowed out. General Voss walked over and sat down beside her. How are you holding up? I feel like I just got interrogated for war crimes. That's because you essentially did. Except the trial will be worse because the defense attorney will actually be trying to destroy you, not train you. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you prepared. He pulled something from his pocket and set it on the table. It was a challenge coin, the kind military units gave to their members. This was from my unit in Afghanistan, Voss said, the Marines you saved during Operation Sandstorm. They made these after the mission to honor everyone who served that day, including you. Lila picked up the coin. One side showed the unit insignia. The other side was engraved with names. Her name was there, right next to the names of the men who'd died. They didn't blame you, Voss said quietly. They honored you, because you ran into that fire when you could have stayed safe. And the men you saved are alive today because of that choice. Lila's vision blurred. I know testifying is hard, Voss continued. I know it feels like you're being punished for doing the right thing. But those men you saved, they'd tell you it was worth it. Because someone who stays silent to protect themselves isn't a hero. Someone who speaks up despite the cost is. What if I fail? Then you fail. But you fail while standing up for what's right. That's still better than never standing up at all. He left her alone with the challenge coin. Lila turned it over in her hands and thought about the men who'd made it. The men she'd saved. The men who'd remembered her even though she'd tried to forget them. Her phone buzzed. Text from Walsh. Prosecution wants you in court tomorrow for a preliminary hearing. Just observation. But you need to see what you're walking into. Lila typed back. I'll be there. Goodbye. The courthouse was a zoo. Protesters on the steps. Reporters everywhere. Security screening backed up for half an hour. Lila walked through metal detectors, flanked by Walsh and Colonel Madigan, while cameras flashed and people shouted questions. Inside, the building was all marble and echoes. Walsh led her to a courtroom on the 3rd floor. We're sitting in the gallery. You're here to observe, not testify. But the defense will know you're here. They may try to intimidate you. How? By staring at you, making comments loud enough for you to hear, trying to make you uncomfortable. Ignore them. They entered the courtroom. Dr. Marcus Holloway sat at the defense table surrounded by his legal team. He looked smaller than Lila remembered. Older. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he'd lost weight. He turned and looked directly at her. His expression was cold, calculating, like he was trying to figure out how to break her. Lila met his eyes and didn't look away. Holloway turned back around. The hearing started. It was mostly procedural, motions about evidence, arguments about witness lists, scheduling discussions. But Lila watched the defense attorneys work. They were smooth, professional, ruthless. One of them argued that Lila's testimony should be excluded because her PTSD made her an unreliable witness. He cited studies about memory distortion in trauma survivors. He painted her as someone whose mental health issues invalidated her observations. Reeves countered with Lila's military record, her commendations, testimony from her commanding officers about her competence and reliability. The judge listened to both sides, then ruled that Lila's testimony would be allowed, but the defense could question her about her PTSD on cross-examination, which meant everything Castellano had put her through was going to happen in front of a jury. During a recess, Walsh pulled Lila into the hallway. You saw what they did in there. That's just the preview. When you're on the stand, they're going to come at you 10 times harder. I know. Do you? Because this isn't training anymore. This is real. You're about to be on national television getting attacked by some of the best defense attorneys money can buy. And if you break, even for a second, we lose. Lila looked through the courtroom doors at Dr. Holloway sitting calmly at his table. He'd killed 3 people through negligence and then covered it up. He'd destroyed nurses who tried to speak up. He'd hidden behind hospital administrators and corporate lawyers while patients suffered. And now he was sitting in that courtroom acting like he was the victim. I won't break, Lila said. How do you know? Because I've already survived worse than anything he can do to me. The trial started 1 week later. Jury selection took 3 days. Opening statements took a full morning. And then the prosecution started calling witnesses. First were the paramedics who'd responded to the pileup. They testified about which patients had been stable at the scene and which had been critical. Then came the emergency department staff, nurses who'd witnessed Holloway's behavior, doctors who'd seen him panic. Security footage was played showing the chaos of that night. And through it all, Lila sat in the witness waiting room preparing for her turn. She ran through mock questions in her head, practiced her breathing, held the challenge coin from Voss's unit like a talisman. On the 4th day of trial, they called her name. The prosecution calls Lila Brennan to the stand. Lila walked through the courtroom doors. Every eye turned to look at her. The jury, the judge, the reporters in the gallery, Dr. Holloway and his defense team. She walked to the witness stand and raised her right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. She sat down. Reeves approached with a kind expression that she knew was calculated to put the jury at ease. Ms. Brennan, can you tell the jury what you do for a living? I'm a registered nurse. I work in emergency medicine. And how long have you been a nurse? 4 years. But you have medical experience beyond nursing, don't you? Yes, I served in the Army as a combat medic from 2019 to 2021. Can you describe what a combat medic does? Lila glanced at the jury, 12 faces watching her carefully. Combat medics provide emergency medical care in combat zones. We treat traumatic injuries under fire. We make life or death decisions in seconds because that's all the time we have. And you received commendations for your service? Yes. The Soldier's Medal. Can you tell the jury what you did to earn that? Lila took a breath. During Operation Sandstorm in November 2020, my unit's convoy was hit by an IED. Multiple casualties. I pulled 4 wounded men from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire and provided medical care until evacuation arrived. All 4 survived. Several jurors nodded slightly. Ms. Brennan, let's talk about November 8th of this year. Can you describe what happened that night? And so Lila told her story. The call for all available staff. The explosion of chaos when the patients arrived. Dr. Holloway standing frozen while people died. The decision to take command. The orders she'd given. The lives she'd saved. Reeves guided her through every detail methodically. Showed the jury security footage, displayed charts showing patient outcomes. Ms. Brennan, 3 patients died that night under Dr. Holloway's care. Can you walk the jury through what happened? Lila explained each case, the wrong blood type, the misread labs, the medication error. In your professional opinion, were these deaths preventable? Yes. And in your opinion, did Dr. Holloway's actions or lack of action contribute to these deaths? Yes. Thank you, Ms. Brennan. No further questions. Reeves sat down. The lead defense attorney stood up. His name was Michael Thornton, and he looked like he enjoyed destroying witnesses. Ms. Brennan, you testified that Dr. Holloway was frozen, but you were also under extreme stress that night, weren't you? Yes. And you suffer from PTSD related to your military service. Isn't that correct? Here we go, Lila thought. Yes. So you have a documented mental health condition that can affect how you perceive stressful situations. True? PTSD doesn't make me unable to accurately observe what's happening around me, doesn't it? You've had flashbacks, haven't you? Episodes where you relive traumatic events? I've had flashbacks in the past, not during the pileup. How can you be sure? If you were reliving combat trauma, would you even know it? I would know it because I've experienced flashbacks before. The pileup wasn't a flashback. It was real. And I was fully present. Thornton smiled slightly. Ms. Brennan, you blame yourself for deaths that occurred during Operation Sandstorm, don't you? Lila's chest tightened. I felt responsible for not being able to save everyone. Felt responsible, past tense. But you spent months in therapy dealing with guilt over those deaths, didn't you? Yes. And now here we are, 6 years later, and you're once again involved in a mass casualty event where people died. Isn't it possible you're projecting your guilt from Operation Sandstorm onto Dr. Holloway? No. No? You don't think there's any connection between your unresolved trauma from losing men you couldn't save and your accusations against a doctor who couldn't save every patient? Lila forced herself to pause, to breathe, to remember Castellano's training. The connection is that in both situations, people died. The difference is that in combat, we did everything possible with the resources we had. During the pileup, Dr. Holloway made preventable mistakes that cost lives. Mistakes according to you. A nurse with PTSD who took command of an emergency department despite having no authority to do so. I had the authority that comes from knowing what I'm doing while the person in charge didn't. That's quite arrogant, Ms. Brennan. You think you know better than a doctor with 15 years of experience? I think I know better than a doctor who was frozen in panic while patients bled out in front of him. Thornton's eyes lit up. He'd gotten the reaction he wanted. You sound angry, Ms. Brennan. Lila caught herself, lowered her voice. I'm not angry. I'm stating facts. Facts, or interpretations filtered through your own trauma. He picked up a document. According to your psychiatric records from the VA, you experienced feelings of rage toward military commanders who you felt had failed your unit. Isn't that correct? Walsh stood up. Objection. Medical records are privileged. Your Honor, the witness's mental health directly affects her credibility. The judge thought for a moment. I'll allow limited questioning, but tread carefully, counselor. Thornton turned back to Lila. Did you or did you not express anger toward commanders you felt had failed your unit? In therapy, yes. That's what therapy is for. So you have a history of blaming authority figures when things go wrong. I have a history of holding people accountable when their actions lead to deaths. Or misidentifying failures that didn't occur because your PTSD causes you to see threats and incompetence where none exists. That's not what happened, isn't it? 3 other witnesses say Dr. Holloway was functioning normally. You're the only person claiming he was frozen, the only person with PTSD and a history of misplaced blame. Why should this jury believe you over everyone else? Lila looked directly at the jury. Because I was trained to assess performance under pressure, because I've seen real panic and real competence, and I know the difference, and because 3 people are dead who shouldn't be, and someone needs to take responsibility for that. Thornton changed tactics. Ms. Brennan, you were suspended after the pileup, weren't you? Yes. And you were angry about that suspension. I was frustrated. Frustrated enough to make false accusations against Dr. Holloway in retaliation? I didn't make false accusations. I reported what I witnessed. After you were suspended, after you had a motive to damage Dr. Holloway's reputation. The timeline doesn't change the facts. The timeline suggests bias, and bias makes you an unreliable witness. They went back and forth for another hour, every question designed to undermine her, every answer scrutinized for inconsistencies. But Lila held her ground. She stayed calm, kept her voice level, redirected to the facts whenever Thornton tried to make it personal. And slowly, she could see the jury shifting. They were watching her not fall apart. They were seeing her maintain composure despite brutal attacks. They were starting to believe her. Finally, Thornton said, "No further questions." Lila stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs. She walked past Dr. Holloway without looking at him. Walsh met her outside the courtroom. "You did it. You survived. Did I help? You destroyed their entire defense. Thornton tried everything, and you didn't break. The jury saw a credible witness who stayed calm under pressure. That's exactly what we needed." Lila leaned against the wall. What happens now? Now the defense calls their witnesses. They'll try to rehabilitate Holloway's reputation, but after your testimony, it's going to be an uphill battle. Over the next 3 days, the defense paraded expert witnesses who testified about the challenges of emergency medicine, the split-second decisions doctors had to make, the Monday morning quarterbacking that often happened after bad outcomes. But none of it erased what Lila had said. None of it changed the facts. 3 patients had died unnecessarily. Dr. Holloway had made mistakes and covered them up, and Lila had exposed it all. On the 8th day of trial, both sides rested. Closing arguments took an entire afternoon. Then the judge sent the jury to deliberate, and Lila waited. Right. The jury was out for 2 days. Lila spent that time at General Voss's house trying not to watch the news coverage, or read social media, or think about what would happen if the jury acquitted Holloway. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, her phone rang. Walsh. "Jury's back. We need to get to the courthouse now." The SUV ride felt like it took hours instead of 40 minutes. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Lila sat in the gallery between Walsh and Colonel Madigan while the jury filed in. None of them looked at Dr. Holloway. That was supposed to be a good sign. The judge entered. Everyone stood. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The forewoman stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Michael Torres, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." Someone gasped in the gallery. "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Jennifer Price, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Robert Hamilton, how do you find?" "Guilty." The judge continued through all 11 charges. Guilty on every count. Dr. Marcus Holloway sat perfectly still as his world collapsed around him. His lawyers immediately requested bail pending appeal. The judge denied it. "Bailiff, please take the defendant into custody." 2 officers approached Holloway. He stood on shaking legs and held out his hands for the cuffs. For just a moment, he turned and looked directly at Lila. The arrogance was gone. The smug confidence was gone. All that remained was a man who'd finally been held accountable. They led him out of the courtroom. The gallery erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors. Family members of the victims cried. Other nurses who'd testified hugged each other. Walsh grabbed Lila's arm. "We won. You did it." Lila stood there feeling numb. She'd done it. She'd told the truth. She'd survived the attacks. And justice had actually happened. Outside the courthouse, Reeves held a press conference on the steps. Today, a jury held Dr. Marcus Holloway accountable for his actions. But this case was never just about one doctor. It was about a system that protected him for years. And that system only changed because one nurse had the courage to speak up. He gestured for Lila to join him. She walked forward into a sea of camera flashes. "Miss Brennan," a reporter shouted, "how do you feel about the verdict?" Lila looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at the crowd gathered on the courthouse steps. "I feel like 3 families finally got justice," she said. "And I hope this sends a message to every hospital in this country. Nurses who speak up should be protected, not punished." More questions were shouted. Walsh pulled her away. "That's enough for today." They got back in the SUV and drove away while reporters chased after them. Lila leaned her head back and closed her eyes. It was over. The trial, the testimony, the attacks on her credibility. All of it was finally over. Her phone buzzed. Text from Rita. "We did it. Every nurse in the hospital is crying. You're a hero." "I'm not a hero. I just told the truth. Same thing." Another text. This one from General Voss. "Proud of you, Marine. You ran toward the fire and didn't stop until justice was served. Well done." Lila stared at that message for a long time. Then she pulled the challenge coin from her pocket and held it tightly. The men from Operation Sandstorm would have been proud too. The men she'd saved. The men who'd known her as someone who didn't back down when things got hard. Maybe she'd never stopped being that person. Maybe she'd just needed a reminder. That night, Lila went back to her apartment for the first time in 2 weeks. The news vans were gone. The reporters had moved on to the next story. The building was quiet. She walked up to her door and found something hanging from the handle. A handwritten note. "Ms. Brennan, my husband was one of the patients you saved during the pileup. We attended the trial every day. Thank you for your courage. You gave us back our family." The Martinez family. Lila took the note inside and set it on her kitchen counter. Then she stood in her apartment and realized how empty it felt. For 2 weeks, she'd been surrounded by lawyers and prosecutors and military officers. Now, it was just her, and the silence was deafening. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Ms. Brennan, this is Patricia Reynolds. I'm the interim director of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. I'm calling to inform you that your suspension has been formally rescinded and you're welcome to return to work whenever you're ready." Lila sat down slowly. "Just like that?" The hospital has undergone significant administrative changes following the trial. We've terminated several executives who were involved in covering up Dr. Holloway's misconduct, and we're implementing new protocols to protect staff who report safety concerns. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we'd like you to be part of those changes. We're creating a new position, Director of Emergency Medicine Clinical Operations. It would involve overseeing triage protocols, training staff on mass casualty response, and serving as a liaison between nursing and physician leadership. And we'd like to offer you that position." Lila couldn't speak for a moment. They were offering her a leadership role, a real position with actual authority. Everything she'd been denied before was suddenly being handed to her. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need, but Ms. Brennan, what you did took extraordinary courage. The hospital is a better place because of you. I hope you'll consider staying." Reynolds hung up. Lila set down her phone and stared at nothing. A week ago, she'd been a suspended nurse facing criminal defense attorneys. Now she was being offered a director position at the same hospital that had tried to destroy her. The same hospital where Dr. Holloway had terrorized staff for years. The same hospital that had only changed because she'd forced them to. Her phone buzzed again. Text from Walsh. "Just got word that Meridian Healthcare Group is settling all the civil lawsuits. Families of the 3 victims are getting substantial compensation. None of this happens without you." Another text from Colonel Madigan. "General Voss wants to know if you're free for dinner tomorrow. He has something he wants to discuss with you." Lila typed back, "What about?" He didn't say. Just said it was important. She agreed to dinner and set down her phone. Then she walked to her closet and pulled down the box one final time. Her Army combat uniform, her photographs, her medals. She looked at the soldier's medal for a long time. Then she carefully packed everything back in the box and put it back on the shelf. Not because she was hiding it, but because she didn't need it anymore. She knew who she was. She knew what she was capable of. And she knew she'd never let anyone make her feel invisible again. The restaurant where she met General Voss the next evening was quiet and upscale. He was waiting at a corner table when she arrived. "Brennan, sit." She sat. Voss poured her a glass of wine. "How are you holding up?" "Still processing. The hospital offered me a director position." "I heard. Are you taking it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to never set foot in that building again." Both valid responses. Voss took a sip of his own wine. "But that's not why I asked you here." "Then why?" "Because I have a proposition for you. The Department of Defense is launching a new program to improve trauma care coordination between military and civilian medical facilities. They need someone to help develop protocols, train staff, bridge the gap between combat medicine and emergency medicine. Someone who understands both worlds." Lila stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to do what you do best, save lives and fix broken systems. The position is based in Washington, D.C., good salary, federal benefits, and you'd be working with the best trauma specialists in the country." "Why me?" "Because you proved you can function under impossible pressure. Because you understand military medical protocols and civilian emergency medicine. And because you're someone who doesn't back down when things get hard." He leaned forward. "You spent 6 years hiding from who you were, but I don't think you want to hide anymore. I think you want to use everything you learned, in combat and in that ER, to make a real difference. Am I right?" Lila thought about the offer from St. Augustine Memorial, a director position at a hospital that had tried to destroy her. Working alongside people who'd stood by while she was punished for doing the right thing. Then she thought about Washington, D.C. A fresh start. A chance to work at the highest level of military and civilian medical care. A chance to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. "When would I start?" she asked. Voss smiled. "Whenever you're ready." 2 weeks later, Lila stood in her apartment surrounded by moving boxes. She was leaving Atlanta, leaving St. Augustine Memorial, leaving everything she'd known for the past 4 years. Rita had cried when she told her. Several other nurses had taken her out for farewell drinks. Even some of the doctors, the good ones who'd quietly supported her through the trial, had wished her well. She'd declined the director position. Politely. Professionally. But she'd made it clear she wasn't interested in staying somewhere that had only changed because they'd been forced to. Her phone rang one last time before she left. Jennifer Walsh. "Lila, I wanted to let you know that the 3 hospital administrators who were charged with obstruction have all pleaded guilty. They're facing prison time. And Meridian Healthcare Group just announced they're implementing the reforms we proposed across all 17 of their hospitals. Mandatory reporting for safety concerns, protection for whistleblowers, independent review boards, everything. Because of the lawsuit? Because of you. What you did changed an entire healthcare system. Nurses across the country are using your case as leverage to demand better protection. You started something that's much bigger than one trial." Lila looked around her empty apartment. "I just wanted to save lives." "You did. More than you know." After hanging up, Lila grabbed the last box and carried it to her car. The sun was setting over Atlanta, the city where she'd tried to stay invisible, the city where she'd been forced to become visible. She got in her car and started driving north toward D.C., toward a new job, a new city, a new chapter. But as the skyline disappeared in her rearview mirror, her phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Miss Brennan?" Male voice. Young, nervous. "My name is David Torres. My father was one of the patients who died under Dr. Holloway's care." Lila pulled over to the side of the road. "I just wanted to thank you," Torres continued, "for testifying, for not backing down. My family finally has closure because of you, and I wanted you to know I'm starting medical school next year. I'm going to become an emergency physician, and I'm going to spend my career making sure no one else goes through what my father did. Because of what you showed me. That one person can make a difference if they're brave enough. Lila's vision blurred. Your father would be proud of you, she said quietly. I think he'd be proud of you too. Torres hung up. Lila sat in her car on the side of the highway and cried for the first time since the trial ended. Not from sadness. From something else. Relief. Validation. The knowledge that what she'd endured had actually mattered. 3 people had died. But their deaths had exposed a system that might have killed dozens more. And now that system was changing. Because one nurse had refused to stay silent. She wiped her eyes, pulled back onto the highway, and kept driving toward her new life. Behind her, Atlanta disappeared into the darkness. Ahead, Washington, D.C. waited with all its possibilities and challenges. And for the first time in 6 years, Lila Brennan wasn't running from her past. She was running toward her future. With everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, and everything she'd become. But as her phone lit up one more time with a final message, she realized the story wasn't quite over yet. The text was from a number she didn't recognize. We need to talk. This isn't finished. Dr. Margaret Castellano, Chief of Surgery, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Lila stared at the text message until the screen dimmed. Dr. Margaret Castellano, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. She didn't know anyone by that name, but the message had an edge to it that made her stomach tighten. Not a threat exactly, more like a warning wrapped in professional courtesy. She pulled back onto the highway and kept driving, but her mind was spinning. 20 minutes later, her phone rang, the same unknown number. Lila answered. This is Lila Brennan. Ms. Brennan, thank you for picking up. I'm Margaret Castellano. I apologize for the cryptic text, but what I need to discuss isn't something I can put in writing. The voice was female, authoritative, with the clipped precision of someone used to running operating rooms. You said this isn't finished. What does that mean? It means the situation at St. Augustine Memorial was worse than anyone realized, and it extends beyond one hospital. Castellano paused. I've been reviewing the military assessment team's findings as part of a broader investigation into Meridian Healthcare Group. There are patterns emerging across multiple facilities. Patterns that suggest Dr. Holloway wasn't an isolated problem. Lila's hands tightened on the wheel. How many hospitals? At least 8, possibly more. We're finding similar complaints about physicians who were protected by administration despite documented negligence. Similar patterns of nurses being silenced or terminated when they reported safety concerns. And similar involvement by Meridian's legal team in covering up patient deaths. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person who successfully exposed it. Every other nurse who tried was either bought off or intimidated into silence. You're the one who didn't back down. And now the Department of Defense wants to know how deep this goes. I'm not an investigator. No. But you understand how these systems work. You know what to look for, and more importantly, nurses trust you. If we're going to uncover the full scope of this, we need someone who can get people to talk. Lila watched the highway stretch ahead of her. I just testified in a trial that nearly destroyed me. I'm starting a new job. I can't. The new job is part of this. General Voss designed that position specifically to give you access to military and civilian medical facilities. He knew this was bigger than one hospital. He was preparing you for what comes next. Something clicked in Lila's mind. The job offer had come too quickly, too perfectly timed. Voss had known. He set this up. He gave you an opportunity. Whether you take it is your choice. Castellano's voice softened slightly. Miss Brennan, I've read your file. I know what you went through during Operation Sandstorm. I know you've spent years avoiding leadership positions because you didn't want to be responsible for people dying. But you just proved in that courtroom that you're exactly the kind of person who should be in leadership, because you won't look away when something's wrong. What do you need from me? Meet me in D.C. tomorrow, Bethesda Office Complex, Building 6. I'll explain everything then. And if I say no? Then the investigation continues without you. But it will take longer, and more people will die while we figure out what you already know. Castellano hung up. Lila drove in silence for another hour before pulling into a rest stop. She sat in her car watching trucks rumble past and thought about the text message from David Torres, the medical student who wanted to become an emergency physician because his father had died under Holloway's care. How many other families were out there waiting for justice that hadn't come yet? How many nurses were keeping silent because they'd watched what happened to the ones who spoke up? How many patients were dying in hospitals where the same corrupt systems protected dangerous doctors? Lila pulled out her phone and typed a response to Castellano. "I'll be there. Send me the address." The Bethesda office complex was tucked behind Walter Reed Medical Center in a cluster of unmarked government buildings. Lila arrived at 0900 hours and was escorted through security by 2 officers in military police uniforms. Building 6 looked like every other administrative building. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the smell of burned coffee. But the security was tighter than she expected. Retinal scanners, badge checks at every door, armed guards in the hallway. They led her to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Dr. Margaret Castellano was already inside. Late 50s, gray hair pulled back severely, the kind of face that had seen too many operating rooms and not enough sleep. She stood when Lila entered. "Miss Brennan, thank you for coming." She gestured to a seat. Also in the room were Colonel Madigan, a woman in a dark suit Lila didn't recognize, and a man in navy dress blues with enough ribbons on his chest to suggest he'd spent decades in command. "This is Commander Patricia Hayes from the Navy Medical Corps," Castellano said, "and Ellen Marsh from the Department of Justice. We're working together on what's being called Operation Clean Slate." Lila sat down slowly. Operation Clean Slate. A joint military-civilian investigation into systemic medical malpractice and corporate cover-ups within the Meridian Healthcare Group network. Castellano opened a laptop and pulled up a document. "What happened at St. Augustine Memorial wasn't unique. We've identified credible complaints at 8 other Meridian facilities spanning 4 states. Complaints that were buried by hospital administrators and corporate legal teams." Ellen Marsh from Justice leaned forward. "Ms. Brennan, the conviction of Dr. Holloway opened a door we've been trying to pry open for 3 years. Meridian Healthcare Group is a billion-dollar corporation with significant political connections. They've successfully blocked multiple investigations through legal challenges and backroom deals. But your testimony created a public record that can't be sealed or buried, and now we have leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that gets us subpoena power. The kind that lets us dig into internal communications, financial records, legal settlements that were kept confidential. The kind that turns a single conviction into a pattern of racketeering." Commander Hayes spoke for the first time. His voice was gravelly and direct. "Ms. Brennan, Meridian has contracts with the Department of Defense to provide care for military families and veterans. If we can prove systemic negligence, we can terminate those contracts. That's hundreds of millions in revenue they lose, which means they'll do anything to stop this investigation, including coming after me again." "Yes." Castellano pulled up another document. "This is a list of nurses who filed complaints against physicians at Meridian facilities over the past 5 years. 23 nurses across 8 hospitals. All of them were either fired, forced to resign, or intimidated into withdrawing their complaints. 16 of them signed non-disclosure agreements in exchange for severance pay. 7 just disappeared from the profession entirely." Lila scanned the list. The names meant nothing to her, but the pattern was clear. "You want me to find them? Get them to talk. We want you to show them that speaking up doesn't have to end in career destruction. You survived. You won. They need to see that it's possible." Marsh pulled out another file. "We've also identified 12 families who lost relatives under suspicious circumstances at Meridian hospitals. Most of them settled for undisclosed amounts and signed NDAs. But NDAs don't apply if we can prove criminal activity. If we can get them to testify about what really happened, we can build a RICO case." "RICO, that's organized crime." "Exactly. If we can prove Meridian systematically covered up malpractice as part of a corporate policy to protect revenue, that's racketeering. And everyone involved goes to prison." Castellano closed her laptop. "Ms. Brennan, I understand you've been through hell, but you have credibility right now that no investigator can replicate. Nurses will talk to you because you're one of them. Families will trust you because you fought for justice and won. We need that credibility if we're going to break this open." Lila looked at each person in the room. "And if I do this, Meridian comes after me with everything they have." "Yes. They'll try to discredit me again, dig up more dirt, make my life hell." "Almost certainly. So why would I volunteer for that? Commander Hayes smiled grimly. Because you already know you can survive it, and because Marines don't leave the fight when there's still work to do. Lila sat back in her chair. She'd driven to D.C. thinking she was starting over. Fresh city, fresh job, fresh life. Instead, she was being asked to walk back into the fire. What's the timeline? She asked. Marsh answered. We need initial contact with the nurses and families within 2 weeks. If we can get commitments to testify, we file charges within a month. Trial would likely start in 6 months. And my actual job, the one General Voss hired me for, is real, Castellano said. You'll be doing exactly what we discussed, developing trauma protocols, training staff, coordinating between military and civilian facilities. But that job also gives you legitimate access to Meridian hospitals, where we need information. It's cover and genuine work at the same time. Lila thought about Rita and the other nurses at St. Augustine Memorial who'd supported her through the trial. She thought about David Torres becoming a doctor because his father's death had meant something. She thought about how many other people were suffering in silence because no one would listen. I'll do it, she said. But I need protection, real protection, not just promises. You'll have it, Marsh said. Federal marshals if necessary, legal team on standby, and full immunity for anything you uncover during the investigation. When do I start? Tomorrow. We've already identified the first nurse we need you to contact. Her name is Diana Foster. She worked at Meridian's facility in Richmond until she was forced out 8 months ago after reporting a surgeon who botched 3 procedures in 1 week. She signed an NDA and took a settlement. But we think she'll talk to you. Castellano slid a file across the table. Everything we have on her case is in there. Read it tonight. Tomorrow you drive to Richmond and make contact. Lila picked up the file. Anything else? Yes. Madigan pulled out a small device that looked like a thumb drive. This is a secure communication device. If you run into trouble or need immediate extraction, you press this button. Response time is under 5 minutes anywhere in the DC metro area. Longer outside it, but we'll have teams positioned near wherever you're working. He handed it to her. Lila looked at the device, then at the people around the table. You're turning me into an undercover operative. We're giving you the tools to do what you already do, Castellano said. Tell the truth. Protect people. Expose corruption. You just have a federal investigation backing you up now. Yes. Diana Foster lived in a small townhouse in a Richmond suburb that had seen better days. Lila knocked on the door at 1400 hours the next afternoon. No answer. She knocked again. The door opened a crack. A woman's face appeared behind a security chain. Early 30s, dark circles under her eyes, expression guarded. Diana Foster? Who's asking? My name is Lila Brennan. I'm a nurse. I'd like to talk to you about what happened at Meridian Richmond Medical Center. The woman's face went white. I can't talk about that. I signed papers. I know, but those papers don't protect you if criminal activity was involved. And I think you know it was. Foster stared at her for a long moment. You're the nurse from Atlanta, the one who testified against that doctor. Yes. You won. Yes. Foster looked past Lila at the empty street. If I talk to you, they'll come after me. They're already coming after you. They came after you when they forced you out, when they made you sign an NDA, when they paid you to stay silent about a surgeon who hurt people. The only question is whether you're going to let them keep doing it to other nurses. Foster's hands tightened on the doorframe. You don't understand. I have a daughter. I'm a single mother. I can't afford legal battles. I can't afford to lose the settlement money. The Department of Justice is building a case against Meridian Healthcare Group. If you testify, you'll have legal protection. The settlement money is safe, and you'll be helping stop the same thing from happening to other nurses. Or I'll end up like you, my face on the news, my life destroyed. My life wasn't destroyed. I survived, and I got justice. Foster looked at her for another long moment. Then she unhooked the security chain and opened the door. Come in, but I'm not promising anything. The townhouse was small and cluttered with toys. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, sat on the couch watching cartoons. Foster led Lila into the kitchen and closed the door. What do you want to know? Lila pulled out a small recording device. Can I record this? No, nothing recorded, nothing in writing. Just tell me what you want and I'll decide if I can help. Lila put the recorder away. Tell me about Dr. Kenneth Marsh. The surgeon you reported. Foster sat down heavily. Marsh was hired 18 months before I left. He came from a private practice in Philadelphia with great references. But within 2 months, nurses were raising concerns. He was sloppy in the OR, forgot steps, left instruments inside patients, made technical errors that caused complications. Did you report it? 3 of us did. We filed formal complaints with the chief of surgery. We documented specific incidents with patient names and outcomes. We followed every protocol. What happened? Nothing. The chief of surgery met with us once, told us he'd investigate, then we never heard back. 2 weeks later, one of the nurses who filed a complaint was written up for a minor charting error. A month after that, she was fired. The other nurse who complained resigned before they could fire her too. And you? Foster's jaw tightened. I kept working, kept documenting. I thought if I had enough evidence, they'd have to do something. Then a patient died. A routine gallbladder removal that Marsh botched. The patient hemorrhaged post-op because Marsh had nicked an artery during surgery and didn't catch it. She bled out before anyone realized what was happening. What was her name? Patricia Reynolds, 42 years old, mother of 3. She came in for an outpatient procedure and left in a body bag. Lila felt cold. Did you report that? I tried. I went directly to hospital administration with documentation showing Marsh's pattern of errors. I demanded they investigate. I threatened to go to the state medical board if they didn't. Foster's voice cracked. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with Meridian's legal team. They told me Patricia Reynolds' death was a tragic complication, not malpractice. They told me my complaints about Dr. Marsh were unfounded and damaging to his reputation. And they told me I had 2 choices, resign with a settlement, an NDA, or be fired for cause and face a defamation lawsuit. So you took the settlement. I took the settlement because I have a daughter to feed and no husband to help me. Because fighting them meant losing everything. Because I was scared. Tears ran down Foster's face. And Patricia Reynolds' family got a settlement too, a big one, with an NDA attached. So nobody ever found out that Dr. Marsh killed her through incompetence. Is he still operating? As far as I know, yes. Lila's hands curled into fists under the table. Diana, the Department of Justice is investigating Meridian for racketeering. They believe this is happening at multiple hospitals. If you testify about what you witnessed, you help build a case that could shut down the entire operation. And put a target on my back. Or put one on theirs. You testified once already. To your supervisors, to administration. You did everything right. They're the ones who covered it up. Now you have a chance to make sure everyone knows that. Foster wiped her eyes. What happens to Dr. Marsh if I testify? If the DOJ can prove he committed malpractice and Meridian covered it up, he loses his license and faces criminal charges. Same for everyone who protected him. Good. Foster's voice went hard. Because Patricia Reynolds deserved better, and so did every other patient he hurt. Will you testify? Foster looked toward the closed kitchen door where her daughter was watching TV. If I do this, I need protection, real protection, not just for me, but for my daughter. You'll have it. Federal witness protection if necessary. Foster took a shaking breath. Then yes, I'll testify. Tell me what you need. Lila left Richmond 3 hours later with a signed statement from Diana Foster, contact information for 2 other nurses who'd witnessed Dr. Marsh's negligence, and the name of Patricia Reynolds' husband who'd signed the NDA under duress. She drove straight back to D.C. and delivered everything to Ellen Marsh at the Justice Department. Marsh read through the statement, then looked up at Lila. This is exactly what we needed. With Foster's testimony and the other witnesses she's identified, we can establish a pattern at the Richmond facility. Combined with what we have from Atlanta, we're building a strong case. What about Dr. Marsh? We'll coordinate with the Virginia State Medical Board. If Foster's allegations are substantiated, his license will be suspended immediately pending investigation. And if criminal charges follow, he's done. How long? Medical board review takes time, but given the severity of the allegations and the documented patient death, I'd say Dr. Marsh will be suspended within 2 weeks. Lila leaned back in her chair. 1 down. How many more? At least 6 physicians across the Meridian network that we know of, possibly more. We're still gathering evidence. Marsh closed the file. Ms. Brennan, you did excellent work today. Diana Foster wouldn't have talked to anyone else. She talked to you because she saw herself in your story. She saw someone who survived. Exactly. And now other nurses are going to see the same thing. Marsh pulled out another file. Your next contact is in Baltimore. Nurse named Kevin Trenton, male nurse, former paramedic, filed complaints about an ER physician who was diverting prescription painkillers. He was fired for theft. Painkillers went missing and they blamed him. He's been trying to clear his name for 2 years with no success. Lila took the file. When do you need me there? Tomorrow, if possible. Trenton's situation is time-sensitive. The physician he accused is still practicing, and we believe he's still diverting medications. If we can get Trenton to testify and corroborate it with pharmacy records, we can stop him before someone dies from an overdose of contaminated drugs. I'll leave first thing in the morning. Yeah. Over the next 10 days, Lila drove to 4 cities and interviewed 6 nurses who'd been destroyed by Meridian Healthcare Group for trying to report dangerous physicians. Each story was different, but the pattern was identical. Nurse reports safety concern. Hospital administration buries complaint. Nurse escalates. Meridian legal team gets involved. Nurse is fired, forced to resign, or paid off with an NDA. Dangerous physician continues practicing. And in every case, the nurses agreed to testify once they realized they weren't alone, that someone had fought the same system and won, that justice was actually possible. By the end of the second week, the DOJ had statements from 11 nurses, 4 families of deceased patients, and documentation of malpractice at 7 different Meridian facilities. Ellen Marsh called Lila into her office and laid out a map of the southeastern United States. Red pins marked each hospital where they'd found evidence of systematic cover-ups. This is bigger than we thought, Marsh said. We're not just looking at a few bad doctors being protected. We're looking at a corporate policy designed to maximize profit by avoiding malpractice suits. Meridian's legal team was paying settlements and burying complaints as a cost of doing business. They calculated that paying off victims and silencing whistleblowers was cheaper than fixing the problems. How much money are we talking about? Conservatively, $50 million in settlements over 5 years, which sounds like a lot until you realize Meridian's annual revenue is $3 billion. They were spending roughly 1% of revenue to cover up negligence that would have cost them hundreds of millions in lost contracts, insurance increases, and reputation damage if it became public. Lila stared at the map. So they built a system to protect criminals. They built a system to protect profit. The criminals were just a side effect. Marsh picked up her phone. We're ready to move forward. The grand jury convenes next week. If they indict, and I'm confident they will, we're going to arrest 17 people simultaneously. Hospital executives, corporate attorneys, 2 physicians, and the CEO of Meridian Healthcare Group. When? 3 days after the indictment. We want it public. We want it loud. We want every hospital in the country to see what happens when you value money over patients. Lila felt something shift in her chest. You're going to arrest them all at once. At their homes, at their offices, on camera. The CEO will be arrested during a board meeting. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. And me? You'll be nowhere near it. You've done your part. Now we do ours. The indictments came down on a Tuesday morning. Lila watched the news from her apartment while federal agents executed arrest warrants across 4 states. Hospital executives led out of their offices in handcuffs. Corporate attorneys photographed being put into unmarked cars. Dr. Kenneth Marsh arrested at Richmond Meridian Medical Center while scrubbing in for surgery. And finally, Richard Morrison, CEO of Meridian Healthcare Group, arrested during an emergency board meeting where he'd been preparing to announce a new round of hospital acquisitions. The footage of Morrison being walked out of Meridian's corporate headquarters in downtown Charlotte played on every news channel. Expensive suit, silver hair, shocked expression, hands cuffed behind his back. Lila's phone rang. General Voss. You watching this? Yes. How does it feel? Lila watched Richard Morrison disappear into a federal vehicle while reporters screamed questions. It feels like the beginning of something, she said. That's because it is. What you started in Atlanta just went national. Every hospital administrator in the country is panicking right now. Every corporate lawyer is reviewing their policies. Every nurse who's been silenced is realizing they don't have to stay silent anymore. It's not over, though. The trial will take months, maybe years, and Meridian will fight every step of the way. But they're fighting from a position of weakness now. Because you proved the system can be beaten. After hanging up, Lila stood at her window watching the city. 17 arrests, hundreds of victims finally getting recognition, a multi-billion-dollar corporation facing federal racketeering charges. All because she'd taken command during a mass casualty event and refused to back down when they tried to punish her for it. Her phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number. My wife was one of the patients who died at Meridian Richmond. Diana Foster told me you're the reason people are finally being held accountable. Thank you for not giving up. Another text, different number. I'm a nurse in Tampa. I filed a complaint about a dangerous doctor 2 years ago and got fired. I just got a call from the FBI asking if I'd testify. This is because of you. Thank you. Then another. And another. Messages from nurses, from families, from people she'd never met who'd been waiting years for someone to care. Lila sat down on her couch and read every single one. Then she pulled out the challenge coin from General Voss's unit and held it tightly. The men from Operation Sandstorm had trusted her to save them when everything was burning. The nurses from Meridian's hospitals had trusted her to speak for them when they couldn't speak for themselves. And she'd done it. Not perfectly. Not without cost. But she'd done it. Her phone rang one more time. Ellen Marsh. Lila, we have a problem. The tone in Marsh's voice made Lila's stomach drop. What kind of problem? Richard Morrison just made bail. $2 million cash. And his first move after walking out of federal custody was to hold a press conference claiming this is a politically motivated prosecution based on false testimony from disgruntled former employees. He's calling us liars. He's calling you a liar specifically. He named you on camera, said you're an unstable veteran with PTSD who fabricated evidence to settle a personal grudge, said every nurse who's testifying was recruited by you as part of a coordinated attack on Meridian's reputation. Lila closed her eyes. So it starts again. Worse than before. Morrison has unlimited resources and nothing to lose. He's going to come at you with everything. And this time it's not just one defense attorney in a courtroom. It's a corporate PR machine with a 9-figure budget. What do I do? What you've been doing. Tell the truth, stand your ground, and trust that the evidence speaks for itself. Marsh paused. But Lila, be prepared. This is about to get ugly in ways the Holloway trial wasn't. Morrison is fighting for his freedom and his fortune. He'll destroy anyone who gets in his way. After hanging up, Lila sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the news. Richard Morrison's press conference was already going viral. He stood at a podium surrounded by lawyers looking righteous and wronged. These charges are based on the testimony of individuals with clear biases and questionable credibility. Lila Brennan, the primary witness, is a former military medic who left the service due to psychiatric issues. She is admitted to having PTSD, to struggling with anger management, to blaming authority figures for tragedies beyond their control. And now she's leading a campaign to destroy a healthcare company that serves millions of patients across the Southeast. Lila closed the laptop. She'd known this was coming, but knowing it and experiencing it were different things. Her phone buzzed, text from Jennifer Walsh. Morrison just painted a target on your back. We need to talk. Tonight. Lila texted back. Where? Same place as before. 1900 hours. Come alone. Walsh was waiting in the same conference room where Lila had first agreed to testify months ago. But this time General Voss sat beside her and Colonel Madigan stood by the door with his arms crossed. Lila walked in and dropped into a chair. Morrison's trying to destroy me again. He's trying, Walsh said. He won't succeed. You don't know that. Actually, I do. Walsh opened her laptop and turned it toward Lila. Morrison made a critical mistake during his press conference. He claimed you fabricated evidence and recruited nurses to lie as part of a coordinated attack. That's defamation. Provable, actionable defamation. And it gives us grounds to countersue him personally for damages. Lila stared at the screen. A lawsuit. A very public lawsuit that forces him to prove his allegations in court, which he can't do because they're lies. Every nurse who testified has documentation. Every family has medical records. Every claim is backed by evidence that Meridian's own systems generated. Morrison just accused 17 federal witnesses of conspiracy. That's not legal strategy. That's desperation. Voss leaned forward. Brennan, Morrison is finished, and he knows it. The arrests, the indictments, the witness testimony. It's over for him. This press conference was a Hail Mary from someone who's already lost. Don't let him make you think otherwise. It doesn't feel like he's losing when my face is on the news being called unstable. That's because you're still thinking like someone who's being attacked. Start thinking like someone who's already won. Voss pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. This ran an hour ago, national outlet, 10 million readers. The headline read, "Hero nurse who exposed hospital corruption faces retaliation from disgraced CEO." Below it was Lila's military photo next to her nursing license. The article detailed her service record, her commendations, her testimony in the Holloway trial, and her role in the federal investigation. It included quotes from Diana Foster, from Patricia Reynolds' widower, from nurses across the country calling her a hero. And it ended with a single line. Richard Morrison claims Lila Brennan is unstable. 17 federal prosecutors say he's a criminal. Who do you believe? Lila looked up from the phone. Who wrote this? A journalist who's been following your story since the Holloway trial. She reached out to me after Morrison's press conference. I gave her everything, your military record, the assessment team's findings, statements from witnesses. She had it published within 3 hours. Walsh pulled up another article. And this one. Major outlets are picking it up. The narrative Morrison tried to create is already falling apart because people remember what you did. They remember that you saved lives and exposed corruption. One press conference full of lies doesn't erase that. Madigan spoke from the doorway. Ms. Brennan, Morrison made the same mistake Holloway made. He underestimated you, thought he could intimidate you into backing down. But you don't back down. And now he's going to learn what happens when you come after someone who's already survived worse. Lila felt something loosen in her chest. So what do? We hold a press conference of our own, Walsh said. Tomorrow. You stand in front of cameras and tell your story. Not as a victim being attacked, but as someone who's already won. You remind everyone why you testified. You name the nurses who've come forward because of you. And you make it crystal clear that no amount of money or lawyers or PR campaigns will change the truth. And if Morrison keeps attacking me, then we sue him into bankruptcy and enjoy watching it happen. Pathetic. The press conference was held on the steps of the Department of Justice building at noon the next day. Lila stood at a podium surrounded by federal prosecutors, military officers, and 3 of the nurses who'd testified because of her. Diana Foster, Kevin Trenton, a woman named Lisa Gomez, who'd reported a physician in Florida and been blacklisted from every hospital in the state. Cameras everywhere. Reporters shouting questions before Lila even opened her mouth. Ellen Marsh stepped up to the microphone first. Yesterday, Richard Morrison held a press conference claiming this prosecution is based on false testimony. I'm here to state unequivocally that every witness in this case has provided sworn statements backed by documentary evidence. Every allegation has been corroborated by multiple sources. And Mr. Morrison's attempts to discredit our witnesses will not succeed. Marsh stepped aside. Lila took her place at the microphone. For a moment, she just looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the reporters waiting for her to speak. Then she thought about the nurses standing behind her, about the families who'd finally gotten justice, about David Torres studying to become a doctor because his father's death had meant something. My name is Lila Brennan. I'm a registered nurse and a former Army combat medic. 6 months ago, I took command during a mass casualty event because the doctor in charge froze and patients were dying. I was suspended for it. Then I was attacked for speaking up about what I witnessed. And I'm being attacked again now because I helped expose a system that valued profit over patients. She paused. Richard Morrison wants you to believe I'm unstable, that I fabricated evidence, that the nurses standing behind me are lying. But here's what he doesn't want you to know. 11 nurses across 7 states came forward with nearly identical stories about reporting dangerous physicians and being destroyed for it. 4 families lost loved ones to preventable medical errors that were covered up by hospital administrators. 17 people were arrested because federal investigators found evidence of systematic malpractice and corporate conspiracy. Her voice got harder. Mr. Morrison can call me whatever he wants. He can spend millions on lawyers and PR firms trying to discredit me. But he can't change the fact that people died because his company protected bad doctors to avoid lawsuits. He can't change the documentation. He can't change the testimony. and he can't change the fact that a jury is going to see all of it. The reporters erupted with questions. Lila ignored them and kept talking. I didn't speak up because I wanted attention. I spoke up because patients were dying and nobody else would. And I'm standing here today to tell every nurse who's been silenced, every family who's been paid off to stay quiet, every person who's watched something wrong happen and been too afraid to report it. You don't have to stay silent. The system that protected these people is breaking, and it's breaking because regular people refuse to accept that profit matters more than lives. She stepped back from the microphone. Diana Foster stepped forward. My name is Diana Foster. I reported a surgeon who killed a patient through incompetence. I was forced to resign and sign an NDA. I stayed silent for 8 months because I was terrified. Then Lila Brennan showed me it was possible to fight back and win. Because of her, I'm here. And because of her, that surgeon will never hurt another patient. Kevin Trenton spoke next. Then Lisa Gomez. Then 2 more nurses who'd arrived that morning from Texas. Each one told their story. Each one thanked Lila for making it possible. By the time they finished, half the reporters were wiping their eyes. Ellen Marsh returned to the microphone for final remarks. This prosecution will move forward regardless of Mr. Morrison's attempts at intimidation. We expect trial to begin in 4 months, and we expect to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Meridian Healthcare Group engaged in racketeering to cover up medical malpractice. Thank you. The press conference ended. Lila walked down the steps flanked by federal marshals while reporters shouted final questions. Walsh caught up to her at the bottom. That was perfect. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't apologize. You just told the truth and let them see who you are. Will it be enough? It already is. Morrison's lawyers are going to advise him to settle. Public opinion just turned against him permanently. The longer this drags out, the worse it gets for him. Fact. Morrison's legal team reached out to the DOJ 3 days later requesting a meeting to discuss a potential plea agreement. 2 weeks after that, Richard Morrison stood in federal court and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct justice and racketeering. In exchange for his cooperation against other Meridian executives, he received 8 years in federal prison and agreed to forfeit his personal assets exceeding $40 million. The other executives took plea deals shortly after. Dr. Kenneth Marsh lost his medical license and was sentenced to 3 years for involuntary manslaughter. Meridian Healthcare Group declared bankruptcy and was dissolved. Its 17 hospitals were sold to nonprofit healthcare systems with new leadership and independent oversight boards. And the nurses who'd been silenced got their voices back. 6 months later, Lila stood in a conference room at Walter Reed Medical Center presenting new trauma protocols to an audience of military and civilian medical directors. She'd spent half a year developing systems to prevent what happened at St. Augustine Memorial from happening anywhere else. Mandatory reporting structures, protection for whistleblowers, independent review boards for patient safety concerns. The presentation ended to sustained applause. Afterward, Dr. Castellano pulled her aside. That was exceptional work. We're implementing your protocols across all DoD contracted facilities starting next month. And civilian hospitals? 3 major hospital systems have already committed to adoption. More are coming. What you built is going to save lives. Lila looked around the room at the medical directors who'd spent an hour asking questions and taking notes. These were people who could have dismissed her, could have seen her as just a nurse with ideas above her station. Instead, they'd listened, because she'd earned the credibility to make them listen. Dr. Castellano, can I ask you something? Of course. When General Voss first recruited me, did he know how this would play out? Castellano smiled slightly. He knew you were someone who wouldn't back down when things got hard. He knew you understood both military and civilian medicine, and he knew you'd already proven you could survive attacks that would have destroyed most people. The rest, she shrugged. The rest was just giving you a platform that matched your capabilities. So he saw something I didn't. He saw what you'd been hiding from yourself, that you were never meant to stay invisible. You were meant to lead. That evening, Lila drove to Arlington National Cemetery. She walked through rows of white headstones until she found the section where Marines from Operation Sandstorm were buried. 3 graves. 3 men she hadn't been able to save. She knelt beside the first one and set down the challenge coin General Voss had given her. I know this is years late, she said quietly, but I wanted you to know that the men you died protecting, they're alive because we did our jobs that night, and I finally stopped blaming myself for not being able to save everyone. She stood and looked at the 3 graves. I spent 6 years hiding from what happened here, hiding from who I was. But I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm using everything you taught me about courage and duty and standing up when nobody else will. So thank you for trusting me, for showing me what it means to run toward the fire instead of away from it. She saluted once, then walked back to her car. Her phone buzzed. Text from Rita. Just saw the news. They're renaming St. Augustine Memorial's ER after you. The Lila Brennan Emergency Center. You okay with that? Leela smiled and typed back. As long as they actually fix the problems, they can call it whatever they want. They're fixing them. New leadership, new protocols. Your protocols. You changed everything. We changed everything. You stood by me when nobody else did, because you were worth standing by. Lila put her phone away and started driving. She'd come to DC 6 months ago thinking she was running from her past. Instead, she'd run straight into her future. A future where nurses were protected instead of punished, where speaking up meant something, where the systems that had buried truth for profit were being dismantled and rebuilt. And at the center of it all was a woman who'd spent years trying to be invisible, who'd been forced to become visible, who'd discovered that visibility meant power, the power to change things, to protect people, to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. She drove through DC as the sun set over the monuments and government buildings. Somewhere in this city, nurses were caring for patients without fear of retaliation. Families were getting answers about loved ones who died. Systems were being rebuilt to serve people instead of profit. And it had all started because one nurse refused to watch people die when she knew how to save them. Lila Brennan had run toward the fire when everyone else ran away. She'd done it in a combat zone overseas. She'd done it in an emergency department during a mass casualty event. And she'd done it in a courtroom when the easiest choice would have been to stay silent. Some people are born to lead. Others have leadership forced upon them by circumstances they didn't choose. But the ones who change the world are the ones who accept that responsibility and refuse to let it break them. Lila pulled into her apartment parking lot and sat in her car for a moment. Then she grabbed her bag and headed inside. Tomorrow she'd present more protocols, train more staff, build more systems to protect the people who couldn't protect themselves. Because that's what Marines did. They ran toward chaos. They protected the vulnerable. And they never stopped fighting, not for recognition, not for glory, but because someone had to. And Lila Brennan had finally accepted that someone was her.